Hello, and welcome back to the Brick Executive channel. And this seems to be kind of a recurring theme now, but this is going to be the first in yet another new series on this channel, which I'm calling the LEGO Shipyard series. And in this series, what we're going to be doing is taking a look at previous LEGO builds I've done and kind of just discuss the design process and how I built it up, and we're going to be using the photographs I took of the build while I was making it, and just maybe share an interesting story here or there, or talk about what I needed to look at to make this thing look correct, or just a story about the ship in general with a particular section, things like that. And I really haven't done this before. I kind of did it with the Icon of the Seas build about 2.5, almost 3 years ago at this point. And I thought, well, if I'm going to do this in a more formal format, I figured we might as well start with her sister. And so in this episode, the first episode of the LEGO Shipyard series, we're going to be taking a look at the second Icon class vessel, which is Star of the Seas. This was an extremely fun build to do, but it was extremely challenging at the same time. And so, without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into it. This first episode of the LEGO Shipyard series, Star of the Seas. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. So what we're going to be doing is this is our final product, right? What we're going to be doing is literally just starting from square one. How do I even get started with designing something like this, or preparing to make something as like this, especially a ship as momentous as this one? I definitely really wanted to get everything I could as best as I could with the type of bricks I have. We're going to go ahead and start here. Now, this is a website I use. It's called Mecha Bricks. And I just utilize this program mainly just to get the basics out of the way, to make sure that the overall dimensions look good, the profile looks good. And in here, I'll make various sections of the ship that I don't want to just purely do freehand. I kind of want to plan them out ahead of time just to make sure I get as close as possible to what is on the actual ship. So when I first started planning Star of the Seas, there was a lot of things I had to think about, especially the color palette, because if you know the Icon class vessels, they are remarkably colorful. So I knew that was something I needed to work on soon. But first thing I always do with any cruise ship I do is work on the profile, which is this right here. And my main goal with making the profile is to make sure that the height of everything is correct. If you look closely at cruise ships, you know that not every single deck is exactly the same height. The cabin decks tend to be very, very similar in terms of height, so I kind of use that as a base and then I work off of that. So, first thing, how do I decide the dimensions? Well, something that has changed since I've done the Icon or building Icon of the Seas video is I actually do have a ratio now that I use. And the ratio is basically one stud is 3 feet and 33% of a foot, so 3.33. The actual ratio, if we're going to be exact, I actually have it written down here. One stud equals 3.32541373 feet. So that's the exact ratio that I use. So obviously the dimensions for stars specifically are known. She's basically just shy of 1,197 feet. I think it's 1,196 feet 11 inches. She's 159 feet 1 inch wide at the waterline, and she's just over 240 feet tall. So, utilizing those overall dimensions, I'll figure out how long I want to make the ship. So, by utilizing that ratio, I came out that I wanted to make the ship 360 studs long. And then I'm going to have to reference this here because I actually have all this stuff written down on a notepad here. So overall, I wanted the ship to be 360 studs long. When it came to the hull, I wanted it to be 47 studs wide. And then the maximum width, I wanted it to be 65 studs wide. And I've got this extremely long list of various things that I wanted to have the ratios for, being like, okay, this is where it stops, this is where it starts, things like that. Okay, so I decided that the ship is going to have a certain length and a certain width. Now I'm going to start looking at the height. This is where this profile comes in. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the best overall profile of a ship I can find that's usually very far away so that you don't have any perspective issues. And there's various profiles out there for these ships that are from the exact side or from the top. And then I'll utilize that to start figuring out, okay, how high things are. Now, unlike the Oasis class ships where the changes in the height of the balcony decks does change, like the bottom three are a little bit taller than the top. The Icon class ships, the balcony section of the superstructure, it's all the same height roughly. So I did what I typically do, and I just make these two bricks high, and then I've got a single plate in the middle here. And then from that, I'm going to start working out the height of the public decks up top, then the height of the lifeboat deck, and then the hull. And something I utilized, and this was kind of nice to have this, is you'll see I've got this strand of studs on its side here. I use that to figure out the overall height of the superstructure. Right about here is where the crown's edge would be on the port side of the ship, and I happen to know the height of crown's edge, and I believe it's 158 feet. It's somewhere in like the 150 range. I don't have an exact number in front of me here, but I knew it was roughly going to be right here. And so knowing that dimension, I used that and compared it to the stud height right here just to make sure that the height matched, and thankfully it did. So I knew that this whole thing was correct. There may have been, I could have added maybe like one extra plate somewhere to make it absolutely exact, but it was fairly close. And if I decide to build, when I build future Icon class ships, I probably will be making a few corrections to the height of some of the decks. That's the thing. When I do any of these builds, half the time I'm trying to test new techniques or new looks just to see what looks good and what doesn't. And I did a number of different tests on the Star build, and some things came out very great, and there was a couple of things where I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that again. I may do something else. So each one of these builds is always a test, whether it's new techniques or new bricks or whatever. I guess it's another thing too I want to cover before we go any further, and it is I do get some comments sometimes from people saying that, hey, your ships are too blocky, they're too rough, they're not smooth at all. Why don't you use like smooth pieces or technic pieces or stuff like that? And the reason why I don't do anything technical is because I want to use my bricks in as many ships as I can. If I buy a bunch of custom pieces for these ships, I'm going to have a ton of bricks that I don't utilize more than once or twice ever. I build a ton of cruise ships. They all have different profiles, different colors, different shapes, especially around the bow and certain areas up on the decks. I want to use as many big basic bricks as I can, just so I've got a variety of bricks I can use rather than having a ton of bricks that are also expensive laying around that I'm not using. So that's why I really don't go all out and buying a lot of very unique pieces for these builds, just because I make them, they'll stay up for a period of time, usually a couple weeks at the most, and then I tear them down and I reuse the pieces. So I just want to have as many pieces as I can that I could reuse in other builds, not have a ton of them that I use for one or two specific builds. So there were a number of things I wanted to get squared away with the profile. Obviously, it was the height of the decks, but then I also wanted to figure out, okay, how could I incorporate these little dents, these cutouts here that are for the lifeboat davits. I also want to figure out how I'm going to build sea view on the port and starboard side. So this is the port side sea view right here. Inside of here would be Pearl Cafe, and then the Pearl would be in the center. And then here's the starboard one right here. I wanted to figure out the thickness of this right here and up top as well. Another thing I wanted to do is figure out the window arrangement for, these are mainly cabins on this area, where this blue stripe would be, you know, the height of the dining room windows right here, things like that. That's what I'm looking at. So I'm just testing out the heights of different things and how they interact with each other, things like that. And then just obviously double check and make sure that everything looks good. All right, so that's establishing the profile. It's pretty basic, just figuring out the height and how each item relates to each other. You know, if the height of the windows change, which it does right before the main dining room on, I think this is deck 4 here on Icon and Star, the height of the windows changes right before you get to the main dining room. So things like that. That's what I'm looking at. Next thing I'm going to do, and this is obviously unique to Royal Caribbean ships, the newer ones, is the name text. I still haven't settled on a particular design or shapes of these letters yet, and especially in the last few ones, I've made small tweaks here and here to the name text. And one of the things I did for this build specifically is that I actually increased the size of the lettering by one stud compared to with, like, I think Wonder of the Seas was the last name text I did, like the big name text. And one of the changes again I made was that I made each letter one plate higher than the other. So that resulted in a few changes. I also changed the design of the S right here for the S and C's, and then obviously that meant the S and Star changed. So I figured out where does the name start, where does the name stop, and then I figured out how high I wanted it to be, and then using that, I built the text together. Then another thing I did was I wanted to figure out the width of certain areas for this build. I wanted to test certain things. I used the overall kind of looking down shot of its Icon in this case, but obviously Icon and Star are virtually identical, and so there wasn't any major differences in structure, so I could utilize that. And I just verified to make sure that, okay, I know these dimensions, so I just verified with this rendering that the dimensions made sense. And then once I established that, yep, the dimensions match up, then I started taking all sorts of different measurements from different areas. And one of them was just figuring out the width of each kind of section of the superstructure and just making sure it lined up and made sense. So I believe this is the forwardmost section is what I was testing here. I also wanted to test it how wide the inner parts of the superstructure would be. So like this would be where Central Park and Surfside is. I wanted to test the width of the accommodation section and then the width of the kind of public section because it goes out a little bit. So that's kind of what I was testing here. I also wanted to figure out how wide I wanted to make the lifeboat deck, and then where the wall of the, in this case, this would be where the Royal Promenade was. I wanted to see how wide I wanted to make that. So these 3 items right here are what I first started building and testing. Everything else that's in this program came later, and we'll talk about those later on. But just really quickly, right here, we've got kind of that area between the funnel, or between the funnels and that superstructure there, that where the star is. This is what's behind it. I just wanted to plan that. You got the funnel here, and then this is the artwork that's on kind of the back starboard side of the funnel superstructure. This is where 3 of the slides for category 6 start. So that just gives you an idea of what's over there. I just wanted to plan this out just because it's so complex and there's so many colors and patterns that are on here. I just want to make sure that I plan this out ahead of time and not try and figure it out, on the cuff. Just makes it a lot easier. But yeah, anyway, we'll come back to that. That is the planning of the kind of the overall stuff out of the way. The next thing I do is I start planning out all the different specific different items. I'm not going to show all of this here. Okay, I guess it's not going to focus. That doesn't matter. But basically, this is all the different things I wanted to get dimensions of right here. That gives you an idea of how much I'm doing to plan these things out. So, like, I'll name a few things off. So, like, I have a hull section right here. Some of the things I wanted to figure out was, where does the name start? Where does the name end? The total length of the name. Where the bow curve stops at the waterline. Where it stops curving, where the lifeboat deck is, where deck 5 is. I wanted to figure out where it stopped curving, at the top of the bow, where the lifeboat bulkheads start and where they end, where the sea view starts and where that ends, where the running track. I'll back up here, like that little opening right there. I wanted to figure out where that started, where that kind of blue section where it starts to taper up right there, and then like where the logo is. Those are the kind of things I'm looking at. It's kind of a little bit overkill, but I want to make sure I get all these dimensions correct. For like the upper structures, I call it. So all the superstructures are on the upper deck. So I wanted to figure out where the Aquadome starts, where it ends, and then where like the baby blue color starts, where that ends. I wanted to figure out where the Grove, which is the restaurant in the suite section, I want to figure out where that started, where it ended. Where the lime and coconuts on both sides started and ended, the base of the funnel, the top of the funnel on the forward side, and then the top and base on the aft side, and then where the center of the Crown and Anchor logo is. Those are the kind of things I am looking at. It is extremely detailed, and you kind of saw a blurry version of the list. So once I get all of those things done and verified, then I will start moving on into actually building the ship. And sometimes the dimensions come out to where it's kind of like in between studs, and what I'll do is just kind of choose the stud where it makes the most sense. There's a lot of structures on these ships where, it happens to line up with 7 or 8 different other things. So if it comes out where it's a stud off, well, okay, I know that this thing lines up with this thing, so I'm going to move it over one stud, things like that. Does everything come out perfectly? No, but it comes out pretty dang close. Let's actually start moving on into the build itself. So you kind of have that background, you see what I'm doing. Now, the whole planning phase usually takes a couple days maximum, especially like the specific dimensions. This one had so many dimensions that I wanted to get correctly. Most ships don't maybe have like a quarter of the dimensions that I made for this ship, just because there's so many known things. There's so many plans out there that are accurate, renderings that are out there. I had a lot more resources than I usually do, compared to building other ships. So I had so much information to work with. So I wanted to especially make sure that everything looked correct and lined up. So let's actually start getting into the build itself and start talking about things. So obviously, nothing much to talk here. This is just the starting shot. Same here. And then you can kind of see what was on my computer at the time. And I've got a ton of things on this computer. And then on my main computer, I had a lot of my onboard footage pulled up, so I could utilize that when the time came for it. And basically, let me move my camera over here really quickly. What I am looking at this point is, the first thing to start with is the bow, of course. And the first thing I am looking at is, okay, I know where the ship starts, obviously, because it's a parabolic bow, so it starts right at the front. And I know where the curve stops. Now I have to figure out how to build this shape. It's like, I know starting off, it's gonna have very little curve, and then about a third of the way through, it's gonna start coming out, flaring out, and then it's gonna have a gentle curve to where it stops. And If I remember correctly, I think I figured out that it stops basically just behind the second lifeboat. Let me check. Yeah, it's like just behind where the second lifeboat starts. It's where I figured out that's where the curve stops. And then, okay, I know that the curve stops, at this particular area right here. Okay, so then I could figure out how much it tapers up here or tapers forward. It's things like that I'm looking at. Okay, so here you've got kind of my version of what the bow curve looks like. And one thing I will be changing when I do a future ship, it'll probably be Legend of the Seas if I had to take a guess, is extend this kind of fore portion out a bit more, just because it really doesn't start to curve until right about here. And I think I started a little too early. It's small things like that I'm just trying to figure out. But this was the curve I figured out. This maybe takes like 15, 20 minutes to make. I've done this so much, I kind of just know how it works. Yeah, that is one change I will be making on future ships. I'll just be increasing the length of kind of this area out a little bit more. Okay, then we start getting into the name text. Now, this actually went relatively quickly, which was surprising. Again, this is kind of a benefit of planning this out ahead of time. So kind of the easiest stuff to work on is the area where there is no curve, where the bow curve is. So I usually hammer that out pretty quickly. And then I start building up the bow. And kind of like what I said earlier, I know where the bow curve stops at various locations. And so based off of that and utilizing different angles of the bow, I'll kind of figure out how I want it to taper out in certain sections. And like there's a particular area on the bow where like the bottom 2/5 of the bow kind of flares out pretty drastically. And then there's an area right below where the kind of the mooring lines are, where that room is, where it stops, and then it tends to flare out way less. You can see on the pictures quite easily. So I knew that at a certain point I had to be pretty dramatic with the flaring, on the bottom, and then at some point it was going to stop, and then I wouldn't have to be as dramatic with the flaring of the bow as it is on the bottom. You can kind of see the second S there. This area is a little tough just because, kind of what I do, and you may be able to see this I guess I don't show it in this photograph. But one thing I want to do is first I want to establish what the brick arrangement is going to be for like this side. So what I'll do is I'll kind of build I guess I kind of do it on here, but I build like this side of the bow to establish what bricks I want to make sure the curve looks correct. And then I will build this side of the bow with the name text in mind, and then do the same thing on the other side. So I'm kind of doing it in 3 stages. I build the brick section right here, like, okay, that looks good, or it doesn't look good, I redo it. Once I've got that established, then I'll come over here and build the final product, and then do the same thing on this side over here. So kind of like a 3-step process. When it comes to like normal cruise ships that don't have any artwork, or it's just a plain color, this section goes up in maybe 30 minutes to an hour. It's pretty quick, just because, again, I know dimensionally where things start and stop and how it flares. It's one of those things where the more you do this, the easier it becomes. It just kind of becomes second nature. Is it perfect? No, but it's a lot easier when there's nothing to work on. So yeah, nothing in particular here. I guess right here I was establishing, I think this is where I wanted this is the bulkhead, that first bulkhead between the first and the second lifeboat. I think that's what I was marking right here. You'll kind of see me do this occasionally where this brick won't be in the final product, but I'm using this as like a mark saying, okay, this is where this particular thing is. Oh, I guess one thing I forgot to mention, you see this down here? I've had a viewer comment on this. He's definitely got a good eye. You kind of see this, it's a bunch of 2x8 brown plates and these 2x2 white plates right here. I kind of use this as a marker, and this thing is 360 studs long, so this is how long the ship is going to be. And I use this to mark out where particular things are. And I think what I was doing is, I think this is kind of pushed back a little bit, but I think this was the marker for where the bow curve on the waterline starts, and then this is where the bow curve stops when it gets to deck 5. I think that's what I was marking right here. And then, I'll use this, when I want the reference handy, I will line up this kind of line of bricks right here just to verify saying, okay, yes, this is correct, because I constantly don't want to be counting the studs all the time. Let me find this right here because I want to make sure I give the right numbers. So the bow curve at the water line, I said stopped at 96 studs. And then where it stops at deck 5, right where the lifeboats are, I'd said it stopped at 61 studs. So I think that's what I was marking right here. So this must be 96 and this must be 61. Again, I'm not going to count it right now, but I'm pretty sure that's what I was marking right here. All right, moving on. Yep, just building up the name text right here. And the bow is extremely flimsy, especially since these bricks right here aren't overlapping. This whole area can come down so easily. So you're going to see me back here putting in a lot of reinforcing bricks right back here. That significantly helps with making sure that the bow is pretty well built and is not going to fall apart or buckle later on, because there's going to be a lot of pressure put on this part of the ship just because of my table arrangement. Most of the pressure on the ship is concentrated in the middle and then the two extremes of the ship, just because the tables I have tend to bend down in the middle a little bit. So I definitely want to make sure that the bow, the stern are heavily reinforced. And then that's the final product right there. Believe it or not, this whole thing from start to this point was about 4 hours of work. Building the bow is relatively easy. The only complicated part was this name text, and I had already planned it out in the first place. So what I tend to do is kind of build up the area where it isn't, there is no taper, it's just flush. That goes up pretty quickly. And then I'll work on the side that's facing me first and then do the other side. You can start to see where that mooring line station is right there. And right at the bottom of where that station is, where you've got these little cutouts where the ropes come out, that is where the tapering of the bow significantly changes from being fairly aggressive to being not aggressive. So you can start to kind of see that, I've got a pretty good change in the width of the bow down here, and then it is not the case above here. You can see it just based on the shadows. Okay, and then the stern. The stern is usually pretty easy. The only complicated part about a stern usually on these ships is what's called the duct tail. And I don't quote me on this, but I think Voyager of the Seas was the first cruise ship to kind of start this innovation. It's kind of like that flaring structure that's right at the back of the ship. It looks like a ducktail. And its main purpose is just to improve the water flow as it leaves the ship, and it actually helps with stabilization, and it also helps with fuel efficiency and making sure there's not a lot of drag on the ship. That's why that innovation, pretty much any cruise ship you look at nowadays has some form of a ducktail. It was ships, before Voyager that really didn't have that innovation, and I think what they found is that it improves the fuel efficiency of the ship by 3%. So it's like you add that up over time. That's a lot of money saved and a lot of fuel saved just by having that. So the ducktail on these ships is not that aggressive. It's not too difficult to build, but there is quite a bit of a camber that's right here. So the one I built for Icon was not the greatest, so I definitely want to improve it here. So this was kind of the overall shape I had established at the bottom. It kind of just stops right here because basically, like, you got the end of the ship and it kind of just has this gentle curve underneath, and then it kind of flattens out. So I had to think of it like that. You can kind of start to see the beginning of the ducktail right here. Obviously I figured out how wide this area is, and then where it starts to start curving in, and then where it becomes flush with the side of the hull. I know those dimensions already. There's the camber I was kind of talking about, and then you can start to see the normal stern right there, and then the ducktail does come up a little bit, so that's what's represented here. I figured it came up about 3 studs every 3 studs I needed to go up a flat plate in terms of height, Okay, then you got the aft mooring station right here. I figured out how wide it needed to be. And then we've got the kind of the dark blue paintwork right here. You've got the logo. I figured out where that needed to start and stop. And you've got more of the mooring station openings right here. And these are markers right here. This is where I was figuring out how wide the bottom of like that white section where the arch area starts. That's what I was marking right here. Then that's the first view of the overall part of the hull. So yeah, what I kind of do with all these cruise ships is I obviously start with the bow, then I do the stern section. Once that's well established, then I will connect the two sections together and build up the middle. So I think if we go back to this right here, let me move my camera over again. You can just start to see the end of the bow section right there. So, you know, these are right next to each other, but then once this is well established, then I'll actually, you know, connect the two sections. The middle, again, this section, this goes up fairly quickly because for the first, I think it's 5 levels of studs. There's nothing in here that I need to try and replicate, or nothing that I really want to replicate, because of there's so many things I can do with basic bricks. If I had access to every single brick imaginable, it wasn't going to cost me anything. You'd see me put a lot more detail in certain sections, but I just don't, because it's not worth it in my mind to try and replicate very, very small things. Like occasionally, I think it would be at the 3rd level of bricks right here, they'll have these very small openings where a mooring bollard would be. It's stuff like that where I don't try to replicate things like that. It's just too small. Oh, let me go back here. So this right here, this is part of the bow tapering. So I think what this was where the curve of the waterline, or the curve of the bow at the waterline stopped. And then, okay, it's like by this point, this is where the curve of the bow stops at deck 5. I've got this many bricks in between. What is the camber of or how does this curve go up? How many studs does it need to go out for that curve to be correct? So I determined, okay, for the first part, it needs to be 4 studs long, and then as it gets halfway up, the curves kind of slopes up a little bit more, and so I replicated that by just, instead of now 4 studs, it's now 3 studs towards the top. That's what this is. You'll see stuff like this occasionally in other builds. It's just reference for me, just so I don't forget it. Yep, nothing special here. You can start to see where I'm going to put those supports in the middle, just because this ship is just shy of 10 feet long. It's just over 113 inches long, which I think that's 9.5 feet. So because of that and how much it matters that everything on the bottom, everything on the bottom is supporting everything on top. So I especially want to make sure that nothing down here buckles or folds in, just because if it breaks and folds in, that's pretty hard to try and correct and to fix. Everything down here is almost entirely hollow. So I just want to make sure that, especially in the middle, there's going to be connections to make sure that this area is reinforced and it stays together and doesn't fold in or whatever. Yep, so we got the start of the windows here, and these are, in reality, these windows are a little bit bigger than what I replicate here. These are about the size of just regular portholes, but I want to try and mimic a change in the size of the windows. So they are a little bit smaller than they would be if I had access to every single brick, but this is what I'm able to do to try and replicate a difference in the size of the windows. When it comes to cabins, what I do is, it's like, this is a cabin right here. If this was a balcony, I'd have, the balcony divider right here. It'd be 2 studs wide, and then have a divider right here. On one side would be my representation of the door, which would be a black stud, and then over here would be a white stud. So I guess each cabin is 3 studs wide. You got the divider, you got the door, and then just a bare wall, and then another divider, a door, and a wall. So I match, obviously, the balcony rooms with these rooms down here, and I make sure that everything's going to match up top. Again, there's that, I think let me double check right here. this, so this right here, what I was marking is where the bulkhead is between the second and the third lifeboat. And this one's pretty important because this matches up with several other things. So obviously this is a divider for the second and third lifeboat. But then above it, this is where on this side, the infinite balconies start. And then above that, that is also where the Icon Loft suites start, like that section of the suite neighborhood. So there's a couple of major things that happen right here. So that's why I'm making this marking right here, just to make sure everything lines up and looks correct. Okay, then we got, this is the main dining room windows. This is deck 3 right here. This is deck 4. And then if you look at the other side, what I am doing right here is establishing the lifeboat arrangement. So back here is the bulkhead for the last lifeboat. This is where the last lifeboat is. And if I zoom in way over here, you can see where I'm marking where the last bulkhead is. This is the end of the last lifeboat area. And you can see the same thing over here. But you can see we got our last lifeboats right here. And then this is where the rib would be. So you can see that I'm marking it back there. And then with those markings, I'm using those to help me figure out where the window arrangement for the dining room starts and stops. Okay, and then now we're starting to get to the beginning of the deck 5 where the lifeboats are. This is where I'm starting to make that extension. And right here, you can start to see the structures I have in the middle to help support the hull, to make sure it doesn't cave in on itself or bend or twist or anything like that as the ship comes up. And then you can start to see the top of the lifeboat extension over. I know that I wanted this to be a certain width wide. I had figured that out ahead of time. One interesting thing is that the width of the lifeboat deck is exactly the same width as how far extended the aftmost balconies are. So the accommodation superstructure on these ships, it has like 3 different stages. There's the first stage that's at the front, it's the narrowest, and then in the middle, starting between the second and the third lifeboat, where that bulkhead is, it extends out slightly, and it goes all the way to the last lifeboat, and then where that last bulkhead is, it extends out again, and that's the widest portion. That widest portion, width-wise, exactly matches the width of the lifeboat deck. So I knew that had to be a certain width. I want to say this section is 57 studs wide, which also happens to be the same width as the Aquadome, stuff like that. Again, all this is planned out ahead of time, and then I just double check it when I build it to make sure that, yep, it's the right width. And then you can start to see the markings for where the bulkheads are going to be. Right here is where sea view is on the starboard side. This is the port side right here. Yep, these 2 areas don't have any lifeboats. It's got the life rafts in there. All right, and then now you can start to see a little bit more clearly where sea view is. This is the starboard side. You got the jogging track that's right here. And most of the jogging track around the ship the jogging track is kind of like this yellow-orange color, and then it's blue elsewhere. But then there's a few areas where it changes. This is one of them. This is the door to where the forward staircase and elevator bank is. Again, I planned this out to make sure that lined up correctly. It changes like this. It's very, very small details like this that I really wanted to incorporate in this build just because I had the information, especially thanks to sailing on this ship beforehand. I just wanted to get these details in here. Are they dimensionally exact? No, but this is how I had to replicate it to make it work. And then these are like the bulkheads I'm talking about here that separate the lifeboats. I would end up changing this about halfway through the build so that it tapered down a little bit differently, just because these bulkheads extend down through this deck and into deck 4. And I added those pretty late in the build underneath. And while I was building those, I changed the tapering angle of these bulkheads here to make sure it worked. Okay, this is the starboard sea view. This is the aft bulkhead right here. These are kind of the entrances into the Royal Promenade. You got one on each side. You can kind of see, this is the one that's facing forward, but you can kind of see the entrance right here. Again, each stud is about 3 1/3 feet in length. So again, with these basic bricks, there's only so much detail I can squeeze out of these things. And in reality, the depth between when this starts and where the door is about, it's a little shy of 3 feet, maybe 3 feet itself. So, okay, well, the depth is one stud. So this is the best I was able to do. And then there's like that's my representation of the crown and anchor that's up on the ceiling right there. And then this floor pattern right here, I had taken so many photographs and videos of the floor patterns on various places. This was about as good as I could get, again, with basic bricks. You've got the window arrangement back here. If you watch my Traveling on Star of the Seas video on the departure out of Port Canaveral, one of the last things I shoot is I just walk around the entire jogging track, just filming. It takes about 10 minutes. And I do this on all ships that have these jogging tracks, and so I can film the floor pattern, how the bulkheads look, where the windows are, things like that. Those are things I'm looking for. It's just so nice having all that detail and knowledge right there to try and build these ships, because when it doesn't exist, there's sometimes a lot of guesswork that has to happen just because I can't find any angles of these particular views. Because other than giant cruise ship nerds like myself, nobody's going to be filming stuff like... People are not going to be filming the floor pattern of this area. So it's nice to have access to that stuff. So, yay. There's the forward one right there. The artwork is different on both sides. And there's the other entrance right there. And then you can see the continuation of the jogging track right there. This is the other side. Again, the artwork on both sides is a little bit different. And again, this is the best I could do in terms of getting the details in. There's some aspects of it I'm missing, but it's just because it's too small. This is the best I could do. This side, so the pearl would be right here. This is where the logo shop is. And then I think this is where the photo, like where you can order your photos, that stuff is back here. And one thing I discovered on this side, you'll see the floor pattern right here. It is exactly I didn't realize this on the ship while I was building this. This is the exact same floor pattern as the starboard side, but just flipped around. So I think it was like 1/3 of the way through this build. I'm like, wait a minute, this is exactly the same as the other side. So that made things really easy in terms of planning. You got, again, the continuation of the jogging track right here. And one thing I'll point out, so the majority of the jogging track is 3 studs wide, where you got the track right here on the outermost point, and then the 2 blue studs in the middle, or on the inside side. But on the area where there are no lifeboats, it actually extends out a little bit more, and then there is a wider blue section on this side over here. So, again, in real life, the jogging track isn't pressed up right up against the lifeboats, which would be right here. But I couldn't... This side was wider than this side, and so just for the sake of getting the look correct, I just put the track flush against where the lifeboats were. In reality, it's not like that, but it's pretty close. One of the many sacrifices I have to make with making the ships like this. The reason why I build them this big is I want to squeeze as much detail as I can out of there. And building them at the scale allows me to do that. If I built them any smaller, there's a lot of details I wouldn't be able to get correctly. And obviously, if I built these things even bigger, which I definitely don't have the capacity to do, I'd be able to do more. But this is what I was able to do. There is no door on this side. It's just a door on this side. Okay, then here's where the jogging track changes and comes in. In reality, there is a section right here where obviously it connects these 2 sides, and then the gym is forward of that over here. But I'm not going to build that because you're not going to see it. So I actually built it in more than I probably needed to. And then at the end of this, I just put like this black protrusion up, just showing that, oh, might extend inside. But in reality, I'm not going to waste that many bricks on something that people are not going to. I'm not even. It's really tough to see this area in the first place. There's no chance to be able to see anything in here, so that's why I don't try and replicate it. But yeah, in reality, the jogging track extends in and through and comes back around out here. And then you can start to see where the beginning of that curve is, where that extension curves up to deck 7. Yep, this right here. I think this is where the staircase... There's a staircase that leads up. I think that's where what's in here. I don't quite remember. But there's that black partition I was talking about right there. Because again, just based on... There's going to be a lifeboat right here, and then there's going to be a few things that are right here. There's no chance in heck you're going to even see this black partition in the first place. So, but yep, there's the jogging track tapering in right there. All right, there's that black partition again, and right here is, this is like a little fun nod. I'm sure most people didn't see this in the video, but this is where, like, if you have a service animal, this is where they can go to relieve themselves, and this is like a little fire hydrant. Just a little nod right there. On Icon, this is actually where I met Rover for the first and only time. It was I think it was our last day or the day before the last day. This would have been Coco Cay or our last sea day, is where I was just walking here one night. It was like, I don't know, 10 p.m. or something, and Rover was right here. So I briefly saw Sailor on Star, but I never properly met her. But yeah, there's a little nod right there. This is where the first lifeboat would be, right here. All right, then with all this built up, now I can really start to work on finishing the bow. You can see the windows right here to where the gymnasium is. One thing I will be changing is, I don't know why, but I got a little bit nervous about how far extended the windows were going. You know, I do all these measurements and I'm like, yep, this is it. I've double and triple checked it. But sometimes in the build, I still get a little bit nervous that I made things wrong. So I will sometimes be a little bit conservative and say, okay, I'm going to stop it right here. But obviously, when finishing the build, I discovered I probably needed to add an extra window right here. And so when I build, let's say, Legend of the Seas next, I'll be putting an extra window right here. Because in reality, this extends out a little bit further than what I replicated right here. So I will be building an extra window. All right. And now I've reached the area where the deck is going to be up on the forward portion right here. So now I'm starting to put in the supports for the plating. You can see again how heavily reinforced the bow is, and this is pretty tough. Okay, and this is the beginning of kind of like, this is the crew only outdoor space. They get on a lot of the modern ships, especially starting with the Oasis class. This is kind of like reserved for crew only. So it's nice that they get their own little place right here, and they obviously get really good views, and they've got that breeze coming right at them, so that must be nice. Right here is a little raising. It's like cruise ships used to build these massive helipads on their bows, like the Freedom and the Voyager class did that. And most of the time, these helicopters don't actually land on the ships. They just winch people off if they need to. And so you've got this big text right here that says winch only. So if someone needs to be medevaced away from the ship, this is where they do it. And then one difference between Star and Icon is this ramp right here. Icon did not have this ramp at all, and this area raised up a little bit. So this ramp, I'm sure, was like if someone was in a wheelchair or something like that, it'd be able to get up on this raised thing right here easier. And then right here, this is the, I think it's called the clubhouse or something along those lines. This is kind of like a crew relaxation area. It's got a bar, a lot of lounging options. It's kind of like their hangout spot. That's what's inside this room right here. Those are the windows right there. Navigation lights on either side, green on the starboard, red on the port side. And then we got the beginning of the forward superstructure right here. Again, I had already established that, okay, this section starts at this stud length. This section starts at this stud length. You know, things like that. That's what I'm looking at. Or like, where does the balconies start? You can just see it back here. Where does the balconies start? Well, it starts right here. You know, there's a ton of things that you can do to figure out how things match up, and it just makes things a lot easier for planning. Yep, I guess there's a better view right here. Like, I knew the balconies on, I think this is deck, let's see, 5, 6. This would be deck 7. This is deck 8. I knew the balconies started right here on deck 7. It happens to match where, like, the cutout for the lifeboat area is. And then, like, the balconies start a little bit more forward on this area. You know, all that's planned out in advance. You can see right here, I haven't done, like, the kind of like the tapering up section for the bow yet. It's still just the structures themselves. And then here we go. This is the tapering right here. You can see like this. I'm so curious as to what this particular thing is. It's like, is there like, I don't know, air conditioning units, like AC ducts in here? I'm not sure what's inside of this. I've always been curious to know what's exactly inside of here. Yeah, I guess that's another thing I mentioned too. There are going to be photographs in here that are not in my actual Lego video. This is picture of the bow, obviously. I think I had sent this to a friend, and that's why I took this picture, just showing him the progress of everything. You can see the window arrangement right here. Okay, here's a good time to talk about a sacrifice. So I'd already established that the lifeboats were going to be a certain width, and then you've got the lifeboat davits outside of that. Okay, so sacrifice number 1, I knew at the bare minimum it had to be this length right here in terms of the lifeboat and the davits fitting. Because of that, this like breakout right here, I think the gymnasium is also taking up this part right here. I don't remember exactly what's in here. I'll need to look at the deck plans. But you've got this cutout right here, which happens to match the maximum width of the bow right here. And that is flush up against this davit right here. And because of that and how the bulkheads lined up, I wasn't able to put the proper window arrangement that's right here. Like, there's a window over here, and then there's 2 windows over here, or maybe 3. Just for the sake of space, I wasn't able to put that in there, so I only replicated 1 window right here. So like in reality on the ship, these bulkheads line up exactly with the balconies, but just for the sake of dimensions, I wasn't able to do that. Like, I was able to get the exact width of these bulkheads down to a T, but because of the way I build the balcony cabins, the cabins themselves are actually slightly bigger than what they are in reality, especially because of the partitions. So yeah, I was not able to line them up on this one, which kind of was disappointing because literally if it was 1 stud wider, they would have perfectly lined up. But unfortunately, that was not the case. So occasionally, sacrifices like this had to be made. Like, for example, there were particular bulkheads where I knew I wanted these things to line up. It was no ifs, ands, or buts. And one of the main bulkheads I wanted to line up with the balcony rooms was this one, just because it's tied to the accommodation section changing width, and also it's where the infinity balconies start, and it's where the icon loft suites start. So there's so many different things, so many different landmarks with this particular bulkhead right here where I'm like, okay, I absolutely want this one to line up. The others aren't the biggest of deals if it doesn't line up. I hope all this is making sense, but this is the things I'm thinking about when I'm building these ships. All right, so we've pretty much built up the bow as much as I want to. Now we're going to go back to the stern. And then again, I determined how wide I wanted this particular section to be. And then these were some markings for the arch. That's eventually going to go right here. The arch is usually one of the last things I build on the ship. In this case, it was definitely one of the, I think it was the last major structure I built, to be honest. You can see the lifeboat deck, the extension stops right there. Nothing to it here. I'd already planned out how the curve is going to go. And there may be a few small tweaks I make on future builds, but this is largely what I was happy with this. Then you got the change in the running track right here. This area I had to make a few sacrifices because, in all honesty, the width of this it's not that wide. I think at best it's maybe like 4 to 5 feet wide. But again, for the sake of getting the details in, I made it a little bit bigger than it actually is. Right in here is where absolute zero is. Those exits that hardly anybody knows about exit right here on both sides. And then again, another benefit of being on these ships and doing all this filming is now I can figure out where the color of the walls change, and it happens pretty much where the opening is right here. So you'll see it change like this wall right here changes from that baby royal blue color to white, and it happens pretty much right next to where this opening stops. And then obviously the height of the ceiling changes, and so it changed from being flush with deck 7 where the lifeboats are. Right here it changes to, I think I determined it to be like 3 bricks tall, and then it changes again a little bit more when it gets to right here. I can't quite remember how that worked, but yep, that's what's going on back here. And then you got the beginnings of the arch right here, and I don't know if this is the final picture, but I think I changed the width of the arch to be 1 stud wider on each side. I don't remember why I made that change, but there was a reason for it. This area right here, that took a little bit more planning than usual. You can see the tapering out right here for the deck above, and then right here is going to be where the end of Surfside is. Right here is going to be Water's Edge, that pool, and then I'd already pre-planned, how wide the kind of like the entire Water's Edge Splashaway Bay structure is. I don't know how to describe it, but it kind of goes like this. I'd already planned out how wide that was going to be because the edges of that whole thing correspond with how wide the arch is. So that's what I'm thinking about right here. Yep, now we're starting to get the beginnings of deck 7 right here. I'm just going to double check and make sure this is deck 7 because I want to make sure that I'm getting the right deck here. So let's see, 6. Yep. Yep, so that is the fitness center. All right. Yep, this is deck 7. Okay. And then you can see like where the indents are, or like these cutouts are for the lifeboat davits. Now, something interesting, and I'm not going to back it up here, but almost all the lifeboats will have 1 stud between the davits and the bulkhead. But 2 of the lifeboats, if you look very closely, I think it's the first lifeboat. Yeah, it's definitely the first lifeboat, and I think this first lifeboat right here, the davits are way closer to the bulkhead than the other lifeboats are. And so the way I replicate on this is that on the normal lifeboats, you've got the lifeboat, the davits are right next to the lifeboat, and then there's a 1 stud space, and then you got the bulkheads. Well, then on the kind of special lifeboats, there is no space between the davit and the bulkhead. In reality, is it like that? No, but it was the way I wanted to replicate the difference. So with the first lifeboat at the front and then the first lifeboat in kind of like the aft section, you'll notice that the davit and the bulkhead are right next to each other. There is no space, but then the others have the space. Right here is where the rib is going to be. You can see the door to where the aft elevator bank is and the stairs right there. And then you've got the divider right here for sea view. There's sea view right there on the starboard side. Yep, there's the top of sea view right there. And of course, sea view on the other side. This is where the Pearl would be. It goes up a further 2 decks. So this is a fun thing to talk about. So because of all the glass right here, especially on the other side, I had actually toyed with the idea of actually building part of the promenade in the middle and actually putting the Pearl in there, just because it's such a prominent feature. And in reality, you can, especially at night, you can easily see into this space. I honestly considered it, and I was about 90% of the way there on actually making this space, but in the end, I decided not to do it for various reasons. But who knows? I may do it in the future. I don't know. But I had actually toyed with the idea of building at least this part of the Royal Promenade, like the immediate part where you would see it. But in the end, I decided not to do it. But who knows? Maybe I'll do it in the future. Okay, now we're in the beginnings of the accommodation section. This is by far and away the easiest thing to build, and especially on these ships, it's a lot easier because, like on previous ships, like in the Oasis class, the suites tend to be kind of scattered around quite a bit. And the typical cabin, again, is you're going to have this divider, you're going to have the door, which is usually a black stud, and then you'll have a white brick right here, and then the divider. And then the way I replicate suites is depending on the size, I'll just increase the distance between the dividers. Again, most of the suites on the ship tend to be grouped in the same place, and so I'm utilizing the deck plans and looking at exterior views of the ship to see where it matches up with, say, the lifeboats to make sure I get it in the correct spot. But yeah, I think this first deck, literally all the cabins are virtually the same width, so I think literally all of them are 2 studs wide, and then you got the divider. Right there, you can see the change in the width of the accommodation section. And I guess you can kind of see right here. So again, these cutouts to where the davits are, you've got 1 stud in between the edge of the davit and where the bulkhead is. But then here's the first lifeboat right here. The davit's going to be right next to the bulkhead. Sea view again. Yep, there's the built up balcony rooms. Again, you got the divider, white wall. Then this is like the representation of the door. Very, very basic. Then there's an overall view of the ship. I am 99% sure I sent this to Justin Hirsch, one of my favorite all-time YouTubers. He does a lot of ship spotting videos. So if you're really into cruise ships, please go check out his channel. It's awesome. I think I first discovered it in early 2022, I want to say, and I just love this channel ever since. And I've met him in person several times. I think we met for the first time. It would have been June last year. I just happened to be overnighting in Tampa, and it doesn't happen that often. Or it didn't happen that often because now I'm with another company. But occasionally things would line up to where I'm overnighting in a cruise ship port, and I happen to be getting off just in time for ships to leave, and so I was in Tampa. I think we were overnighting in St. Petersburg, but obviously the port is like a 30-minute drive away. So I made the drive, and Grandeur and Enchantment of the Seas were there. So I filmed it, and Justin was right there. Now, I waited till the ships left before I introduced myself, and he actually happened to know who I was, which I was a little surprised about. I figured he would not know who I was, but he actually had heard of my channel and had seen some of my builds. But yeah, we met for the first time. That was awesome. So Justin, if you're watching, hi. All right, so yep, there's an overall view of the progress, and I think this is 3 or 4 days worth of work. There's another view right there. You can see the name text right there. So same thing back here. I guess here's another sacrifice I had to make. So all of these bulkheads are kind of like that baby blue, royal blue color, except for the forwardmost and the aftmost bulkhead. And I had the decision, do I make it white or do I make it the royal blue? Because on the outside, it's white, but on the inside, it's royal blue. In the end, I decided to make it white because what I'm going to see for the most part is the outer part. So I just made it white. Oh, I guess you can already see that I've made the change to how the bulkheads taper. Whereas before it was like 1 stud, 2 studs, and then 2. Now I've actually done 1, 3, 1 so far. So I've already made that change there. Yep, so now we're reaching the level to where the infinity balconies are going to start. Again, that starts at this bulkhead right here where the width changes, and so now I'm building that up. The way I built this was slightly different to what I did on Icon. Still not 100% satisfied with it. I'll probably make a few changes on future builds, but I was definitely happier with how this change in width was replicated on this build compared to the Icon build. Then right here, you can start to see some of these suites right here. I have no idea what suites these are. I am not that good with identifying what suites are on what areas. I don't really pay attention to accommodation that much, but you can see some of these suites right here on this level. Yep, there's the infinite balconies right there at the first level of them. And again, another limitation. The majority of these dividers are blue, but then at the very edges is a little bit of white. And so it's not purely this kind of dark navy blue color, but because of my basic bricks, I had to choose one or the other. So I'm going to choose blue because by far the majority, the major color on this section is blue. It's 85, 90% blue. So that's what I'm going to replicate. And then you can finally see where I'm doing the same thing on the other sides right here. Sea view on this side is ended. There's the front. Again, I had figured out, okay, I know I want to figure out how wide this section is. So I took the overall heads down view of the ship and I figured out how wide this blue section is. So yet another thing I'm looking at. All right, so now we're starting to begin the supporting structures for Surfside. Right here is where the water's edge pool is going to be. And then, Splashaway Bay is going to be right here. So I'm just adding in all these different structures to help reinforce these plates. And then this was one new technique I had tried with the ship, and I'm probably going to do this for the future, is I built the outline of like certain venues or different patterns inside the decks. And so all of this is actually one stud wider or further out than what the actual structure is going to be. And the only reason I'm doing that is just so it makes it easier with laying the floor pattern, as I call it. So right here is where you can see the outline of where a water's edge pool is going to be. And this whole outline right here is where a splashaway bay is. So in the next, I think it's the next picture, you're going to see me have this all filled in. Yep, there it is. So now it's all filled in. Again, you can see where the edges of water's edge is. And then here's where, right here is going to be where splashaway bay is. And then baby bay is right here. Again, this is another big change between Icon and Star. Icon, Splashaway Bay area, it had a very different, like it had the same shape, but had a very different color palette and floor pattern than this one. So this one took, I want to say 45 minutes to figure out, but there it is. Another new technique I really wanted to try on the ship, I had done it before, but not in official quantity, is the way I was going to try and replicate water depth. And so if the water is more shallow, like if it's extremely shallow, what I'll do is just do clear translucent plates, like the white plates. You'll see that on the surf simulator. If it's marginally deep, I'll put in like these light transparent blue plates. And if it's deep, then I'm going to put in these dark blue plates. And honestly, I'm quite happy with how it turned out. I was a little worried about it at first, but it actually came out well. And so I did this in various other locations throughout the ship. Don't remember what I was marking here, but these are obviously markers right here. You can see there's another marker. Actually, there's multiple markers. So I think what I was replicating here is where like the end of the accommodation superstructure was going to be. So I think right here is where this side was going to end. Over here was where this side was going to end, I think. Something like that. And then these markers right here, like you can see the red and the blue. These are the markers, same thing on the other side, of where each venue inside Surfside is going to start and end. So like right here, these two markers, oh, that's what that is. These two markers right here are where Pier 7 is going to be. And then right here is going to be where I think this is a Sugar Beach. And then forward of that is going to be the arcade. Over here, this is where Surfside Bites is. And then right here is where the aft funnel or aft tower uptakes are going to be. I'll get into that in a minute because this area, this is some bit of knowledge I really want to know, but that's what these things are marking. You can start to see some of the more supports. You can see this little stud right here is the marker to where Surfside terminates. So this is as far back as Surfside's going to be. That's what this brick is representing right here. So This supporting structure right here, this is a deck below from the majority of where Surfside is, just because this is an entrance on, I think it's deck 6. There's like this little small vestibule right here. You got a staircase that'll be right there. So that's what this is for. And yep, there's the full supports out. Again, you've got these markers down here for where the different venues are going to be. This is showing, so these two outer bricks right here are representing the entire width of the bottom section of Surfside. And then these two inner bricks are representing how wide the accommodation section is going to be for Surfside. And it matches with both Surfside and Central Park. It's just me marking it out. You can see the beginnings of that area on deck 6 where you can access Surfside. I haven't built a staircase yet, but then there's like that little floor pattern right there. Right here is where the flamingo is going to be, and then obviously the stairs on this side. There's another overall picture. I think I had sent this to Justin as well. I think that's the only reason I took this picture. Holy cow. So I'm not 100% on this, but I'm pretty sure Surfside was the venue that took the longest to build. And obviously the majority of it was just laying the floor. I mean, look at how many 1x1 studs there are around this thing. I figured out, again, the outline of each venue, where the walls are. And then I'd already planned out where each venue is. And by doing that, that helped me figure out the landmarks for where the changes in the floor plan would be. It's like right here, you can see, like this is where the arcade entrance is. This is where Sugar Beach is. That's where this playground is going to be. So yeah, things like that. This blue and like white pattern is where like the common path is, and then everything else is gray. Yeah, I think this whole thing took about, I'm going to say 9 hours to make. Like this whole floor pattern right here took 8 or 9 hours to make. Yeah, look at the difference in the lighting. This, like, already probably 3 or 4 hours have gone by, and I was building this in December, so me living where I live in December, you get at best 6 to 7 hours of sunlight. So yeah, it was dark a lot. But now you can start to see I've got the majority of the, at least first level of the structures in Surfside done. You've got Lemon Post Bar right here. This is Surfside Bites, I think. And then this is the eatery right here. I've got the beginnings of Sugar Beach going on. This is the wall where the playground is. And then here's Pier 7 right here. Yep, so still basics. And then I think the next morning I worked on, yep. All right, so over here, this is one of the major mistakes I've made with this. So when I was determining the width of the staircase right here, I planned it based on how wide the accommodation section is. And by the time I realized it, it was way too late to try and rip all this up and redo it. Like, the width of this section is correct, but I needed to move the staircase over at least another stud or two. So, like, this staircase would be 4 studs wide, and then this staircase right here would be 3 studs wide instead of 2. Because this dry slide that's right here, this is way too wide. It should have been 1 stud wide. So everything in this section should have been moved 1 stud over. So that is a mistake I made. Definitely going to be changing that in future builds. And then this was kind of a mistake, but I'm not too upset about it. The arcade pattern should have gone out a little bit more. Again, I'll correct that in future builds. All right, here is where the bottom level of the Ultimate Family Townhouse is. You got the staircase that's right here, and there's kind of like this teal blue color right here. And then right here, I think, is the edge of a bathroom, a public bathroom that's right here. Very, very small space, very tight space. Can't get a lot of detail in here. But that's what this section right here, and there's like this grayish brown, light brown picket fence that's around here. That's what this is right here. Yeah. And then there's the end of the Lemon Post bar right there. And this is a reference brick right here, and I think this is how far back the aftmost balconies are, at least on the bottom level. I think that's what I'm trying to represent right there. All right, this is the bottom two levels of Surfside done. So this is everything cleaned out. I still don't have like the carousel or the playground in there yet, but this is how the walls look. Planning this was quite interesting just because there's so much equipment in front of it, but this was what I was able to replicate based on what I was able to see right there. There's Pier 7. Again, the arcade, Sugar Beach. I forget what this is, but it's like a little shopping place. There's like beach-related stuff in there. All right, this is when we start to add the details in. So something I'm very proud of is the flamingo statue that's right here. That was quite fun to build. It took like, I don't know, 5 or 10 minutes to make this, but that was cool. And then, again, these are very small details that I do not expect people to pick up on, but in videos like this, I'll point them out. Right down here is my representation of like, it's maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, but it's a watermelon slice. And so you really have to look down there. And in the grand scheme of things, most of this stuff is pretty well hidden. You can look for it if you look really hard, but it's details like this where, unless I point it out, 99% of people are not going to see it. But this is the kind of detail I like to go into with these builds is stuff like this. It's like, is anyone going to see this? Probably not, but I know it's there, so I'll put it in. So yeah, little watermelon slice down there. Again, more patterns right there. There's that little surfboard that says Surfside right here. There's the carousel. Very, very low detail. I don't even attempt to try and put any of the equipment in just because I can't make that kind of detail with the bricks I have. So that's everything filled in. There's that park right there. There's the carousel and kind of like these light structures right here. There's the other side. So you've got the Surfside bites right here. That was a pain to build just because there's so many different colors. So I had to pick the colors I wanted and build them up. There's the Surfside Eatery arch that's right there. The different color patterns back there. Again, you're not going to see this stuff at the end of the day, but again, I want to make it as accurate as I can. So I've got the pattern in there. There's the lemon post bar right there. And then the beginnings of the accommodation section for Surfside. Again, this whole area, it took basically 2 days of work to actually build this venue. Basically up to this point. Lots of work. And then you can kind of see right there the third level of the Ultimate Family Townhouse right there. Then you got the Surfside Suite rooms right here, the family suites, where it's basically the size of 2 cabins put together. You've got that, I think they call it the kids nook, like the kids bedroom basically. It's basically just like there's a couch and a TV in here, and the couch can convert into a bed. That's what's inside these windows right here. And then like the rest of the cabin is all back here. Then you got these colors. This is a change I definitely made between this and the icon build. Now, in reality, Surfside, on the outside of these decks right here where the colors are, it's got like this little horizontal wavy pattern right here where it's white. I tried replicating that on the icon build, and it did not turn out well at all. And it looked incredibly bulky and just, it didn't look good. And it was way bigger than it is on the actual ship itself. So for the sake of, I wanted the colors to be pronounced, to show that they're there. And so between that and how honestly kind of ridiculous it was on the icon build, I decided not to do that little white wavy pattern on the outside of these decks. So I think in my opinion, it looks a lot better not having it, but that is a detail I decided to forego just because I can't think of a way with the bricks I have to try and build that feature. It would just look ridiculous in my mind. Okay, I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about this, and then I'll bring it up a little bit later because I know there's a photograph of it. But right here is where I'm 99% sure this is the case just because of how things line up. But I'm pretty sure this is where the uptakes are for the aft towers. They're funnels, basically. What exactly they're exhausting out, I'm not sure. But you don't have cabins here, obviously. Why is it that on the port side, the kind of balcony decks, why does it continue? And then on the starboard side, this entire area is open. Why is that the case? That's something that's always bothered me. Like from the moment I saw it on Icon, it just it bugs me so much not knowing why, like why there's a difference on both sides. I'll point this out again, but this is the port side. So just remember on the port side, the decks continue through this little opening right here. And then on the starboard side, it doesn't. This whole area is open. So remember that. All right. Now I've built up Surfside enough. Now I'm going to start working on Central Park. So these are the foundations for it right here. And there's some views, overall views of the whole ship, so you can see the progress. So I've gone up basically 3 accommodation levels on the outside. I've got 4 levels inside Surfside done. And then now we're working on Central Park. Just to give you an idea of how many bricks I have at this point, look at these bins down here. This bin is just 2x4 flat white plates. So look how much is in this thing already. When everything is taken down and all the bricks are sorted, this thing is overflowing. So this gives you an idea of just how many of these white bricks I've already used already. Here's the 2x4 black plates that are in here. I think this is the 2x4 navy blue bricks. And I think these are the 1x4 navy blue bricks that are right here. So yeah, I've got an entire system here. And this is a very small part of all the bins I have. The majority of them are actually in the shot to the right of here. I've got a whole table on this side that are not in these photos. But various buckets and bins just full of these bricks. There's another view. I think I sent these to Brandon Barker, who I started corresponding with back in December, I think. Another cruise nerd celebrity in my mind. His channel is absolutely awesome. If you're a cruise ship nerd and love learning about these ships, he's another good channel as well to go check out. Okay, so same thing I did in Surfside. I laid the outline of the walls of Central Park, and again, these are exactly where the walls are going to be. So I use this to help figure out the floor pattern. And then you can see the markers on the outside right here. So like right here is where Chop's Grill is going to be. This is where the trellis bar would be. This is where the living wall on the starboard side is. This is where Park Cafe is right here. And then the shops right here. And then back over here, you've got Lou's, I think is what it's called, the jazz club. Then right here is where the Pearl is. Here's where the living wall is on the port side. And then this is where Azumi in the park is right here. And, you know, I've got the width of the venues marked out back here. So yeah, those are what these markers are representing here. Then you got the floor pattern. I think this took a couple hours to make at the end of the day. Just making sure everything lines up correctly and the patterns look correct. Make sure that the width of the main walkway here was good. It is a little bit hard to replicate the exact floor pattern for this venue, just because it's very angular. So in reality, I think I did a decent job in replicating the floor pattern, but it's not exact. Yeah, it obviously has its limitations. So, but this was it. And then this yellow section right here is just where the plants are going to be, because I don't have a lot of green bricks in the first place, and so I didn't want to waste it by putting them in here when they were going to be hidden away later on. So yep, now I've filled in all those yellow sections with the plants. There's the beginnings of Azumi back there. There's Chop's Grill. And the living walls. These are one of the last things I actually worked on, just because I wanted to work on it all at the same time. There's an overall view of Central Park when the first level was done, essentially. Nothing too crazy with this shot. All right, then this is when I started completing the venues themselves. So this is what Azumi ended up looking like. Another change, I didn't put this in the star video because... So there's a section of the star video. If you haven't seen it, it's Star of the Seas, the second installment in the Icon class. If you haven't seen that, go check it out. It's It's about 2.5 hours long, but I go really in depth on talking about the development of Icon of the Seas, Project Icon. But obviously, its main focus is talking about Star of the Seas, her development, her construction, her early life, the reviews. There's one section in that video where I talk about the differences between Star and Icon, and I think I put in 17 differences between the ships, and most of them was just changes in exterior artwork. Structurally, they are virtually identical, but one of the I originally I had a list of like 40 or 50 different changes. They were extremely trivial, so most of them I decided not to put in. But one of the trivial things that was taken out was that there were no plants on top of this section of Azumi in the park, or of Azumi on Icon, but on Star there were plants up here. So one little difference, but it's one of those things where it's so trivial, it's not even worth putting all of these in here. But that was one change between Star and Icon that wasn't in the video. Okay, then there's the covering that's over where the pearl is, right there, and it matches up exactly with the sea view, of course. There's the entrance to where you can go through here and down some stairs, and now you're in the Royal Promenade. Here's Lou's right here. And then back here are going to be 2 additional living walls. And again, I'm going to wait to build these until I've got the entire height of Central Park done, just because I want to build it all at once. Here's the other side. Here's Chop's Grill right here. There's a few little art pieces are right here. Again, in reality, they're not on the wall. They are slightly outside of the wall. But again, if I put these one stud out, that means that they'd be 3 feet away from the wall. And in reality, they're maybe like an inch or 2 off the wall. So I decided to make them flush with the wall right here. There's the trellis bar right there. Here is Park Cafe right here. Very simple details, but there. And then you've got some various shops right here, some more high-end shops like watches and jewelry and stuff like that. And then here is the view of all the plants being in there. This is always a fun thing to add in. This is one of the first things where I add quite a bit of detail right from the start. With most of these menus, I tend just to add the major details first, especially the ones I won't be able to get to later on, and then add the minor details later. But just because of how tight the space is going to be later, I just add all the details here and now. So there's the plants. And then another detail I added that most people probably won't notice is this tree that's right here. That's by Azumi. And it's got these reflective, they're kind of like a bluish purple color, like the leaves are. And so the way I replicated that was using these translucent blue plates right there. All right, then now I'm starting the building up the accommodation section for Central Park. This was one of the things on the Icon build that I got completely wrong because, again, when I built the Icon Lego model, by the time I finished it, Icon had just gone on her first round of sea trials, so she was far from complete. And so throughout the entire build, I was using all the different renderings and videos that Royal Caribbean and Meyer Turku had put out. And especially in Central Park and Surfside, the renderings were very different from each other and showed different things. Like, one of the things they didn't show was that each of these infinite rooms that would be on the bottom levels of Central Park would have these multicolored shingles on the side. It didn't show any of that. And then the dividers between the rooms, and some of them they showed them to be brown, and some of them they showed the dividers to be gray. Some of them it showed them to be white. So I think on the Icon build I made them brown. But when it was all said and done, it was vastly different from what I had built. So it was one of the main things that I was not happy about with that build. Yeah. So now with this build, this was the way I was able to replicate the shingles. Again, I didn't want them sticking out because in my mind it would look ridiculous. So I just put them flush with the window. And not all the rooms have the shingles. Every once in a while, you'll have one where there isn't one at all. So, and again, 99% of people are not going to notice this, but I did my best to make sure that the pattern matched exactly what the pattern was on the real ship. So like the bottom level, I think I made a few mistakes just because I wasn't able to get any really good angles from all my footage or other footage I found online of the bottom level. But especially with the top two levels, I was definitely able to nail down the pattern. So there's the bottom level right there. There's the second level. So like the amount of footage and technical photographs I make on these is a little insane, probably, to be honest, but there's so many particular views of things I want. Like I want as many pictures and views of how these things start and end, because most of the time you can find footage where it's showing like this central portion right here, but in terms of footage of like this area where it changes or this area right here, what they look like, it's really hard to find. So I took so many photographs of, okay, I always take a photograph of this area right here, then this area over here, then this right here, then this over here, just so I see how each venue ends, I guess, how the change happens. All right, then I worked on another level in Surfside right here. And then, yep, so by this point, both of these things are level at this point, and they are 2 levels above where the outside accommodation is. So I'm just kind of showing how, especially like Central Park, this thing is basically just floating on its own. There is nothing connecting it to the outside except the supports underneath. So it's just funny seeing how isolated they are. You can see the back side of them. All right, then now I'm going to start building up the accommodation section even more right here. Again, nothing too complicated. I'm basically replicating what's underneath right here, making changes to like sweep patterns if there are any. There's the third level of the infinite balconies. That'll be the last level of them up here. Again, we're working on the front right here. Another level in Central Park, and I think this is the last level of the infinite balconies right here. Again, the colors of the shingles that are right here, it's virtually the same as what's on the real ship. Another level in Surfside right there. Then working on more accommodations. There's a few suites that are right there. This is something that, again, most people don't notice this. If they do notice it, they may see it as a mistake. So notice with the doors on all the different rooms, I use black. But then you see a gray one right here. So I have some 2 very close friends of mine that sometimes cruise with me. They obviously get their own cabin. I always cruise by myself. And then if they're on the same ship as me, or if they have traveled on the ship, if they remember the room they were in, I ask for it, and then I will mark their room with a gray door, so that when they come over to see my build, to be like, okay, see if you can try and find your room. And so this is the way I mark it. So that's their room. They were on the Star Cruise with me, and that was their room. My room was on deck 8. Okay. So this is getting back to the aft tower uptakes. So this is and you can kind of see on the iPad right here. This was my photograph of it. This is what I'm trying to replicate. So basically the photograph shows this section right here. That's what you're seeing on the screen right there. So again, you can kind of see in the photograph, why is this side completely open and the decks don't extend over it, but then on the port side it does? So that's what that is. Look, I put it right there. Again, these decks don't cross over right here, but then on the other side it does. Why? Okay. Yeah, so if anyone knows why that is the case, please let me know, because that's one little piece of knowledge that I just desperately want to know. Is there a reason for it? Probably not, but I just want to know why. Okay, then this is the underside of what is of the deck that's going to be underneath where the aft towers are and where the beginnings of the hideaway are, where the infinity pool is. I think the infinity pool is going to be above this section right here. But this is the flamingo artwork on the bottom right here. Again, is it perfect? No, but this is what I was able to replicate. Yep, and there it is right there. Again, the artwork terminates where the balcony rooms are, except for this part right here. Again, this is where that starboard side aft tower uptake is right there. You can kind of see it right there. And there's the different colored decks right there. Oh, again, this is another change. So right here, there are no cabins, obviously. Why does this side have a gray railing? It's not translucent like the other ones. But then on the other side, it's got a purely translucent railing, similar to what it is over here. Why is this gray over here and it's not over here? It's differences like that where I'm like, there has to be a reason. I don't know why, and I can't figure out why. And if I ask a typical crew member, I mean, they're not gonna know. Yeah. So there's another small change I found when building this. Okay, moving on. All right. So now I've reached the one of the highest levels of the neighborhood, of the Central Park neighborhood, and I've reached the highest to where the living walls are going to go. So this was my opportunity to build the living walls. Very basic. I didn't want these things to be super detailed just because, again, they're going to be largely sheltered away from the completed product. You can see I have a picture up right there of it's this living wall right here. You can see the trellis bar right there. Okay, and then this is the back side. Again, you got two more living walls right here. And then you've got a couple art pieces on each side. You got this one over here, and this one over here. It's different floral and plant designs that are on this side. Again, are they 100% perfect? No, but they're pretty close. And obviously, there's so many details in that thing. I can't replicate everything, so I just tried to replicate as many of the major details as I could. Then there's two more pieces right here. This is going to be the piece that goes right by the forward living walls, and then this is going to be the piece that goes right in front of the aft elevator bank where the aft living walls are. And on Icon, inside this section right here, this is where the shipbuilder's model was. And then on Star, they didn't have a shipbuilder's model, that was a little bit disappointing, just because you've got this massive space inside the elevator bank area, and it's just dead space. There's nothing there. There's not a reason to go in there. Whereas on Icon, you have the shipbuilder's model in there, so it was something to go see and look at. I mean, it's a massive and incredibly impressive piece, but on Star there was nothing here, so just a little bit of a rant there. And there it is up there. That's the inside of here is where the aft elevator bank is. And then there's the piece that's over the living walls. Right there, you can see them on both sides. Okay, so moving on from that, you can see the above view right there. And then, interesting little note. So this is going to be the highest level of the accommodation section before you start getting into the public areas. So the deck that's going to be above this right here is going to be where Chill Island is. This is where deck 15 is going to be. And interesting thing on deck 14, particularly in Central Park, is there's certain areas where you've got these kind of faux cabins. These aren't actually cabins right here. There's no rooms in there, but they still replicate the dividers and the railings here. And what these are going to be, especially over here, this is where Royal Bay pool is going to be. It's the largest pool ever put to sea. And so where the pool comes down and all the equipment for it, that's all going to be in this space. So there's no cabins right here. And I'm not sure. I think I know why, but I'm not 100% sure why. So the Cove pool is going to be over here eventually. And I think the equipment for that pool is over here. Because in reality, there is no pool that's exactly right here. It's just a flat deck. In fact, this area over here is just going to have a bunch of sun loungers right there. But you've got the Cove pool right here, and, well, you need a place to put the equipment and all the water treatment systems and stuff like that. So I'm assuming all that equipment is over here. And so that's why there's faux cabins right here. Because in reality, again, there is nothing that's directly above this where you'd be like, I wonder why there's no cabins there. But 99% sure it's because it's the equipment for the Cove pool, which is back here. Some more overall shots at that point. So again, you can see like those pieces right here where they cut into the accommodation section. And the hideaway pool is going to eventually be right here. Right here is going to be where those aft towers are. Again, another view right there. So you'll notice I haven't worked on the forward part of the bridge yet. And that's because I wanted to build up this back section enough to where I could work on the bridge section all in one shot. And then finish the top level of Surfside right here. This is the last of the accommodation before you get to deck 15. And then that's when I work on this artwork right here, all these different color swirls. Low detail. Could I have made it more detailed? Probably, but I don't really see a way I could have, unless I utilize a lot of unique bricks. And some more views right there. I think this is Christmas Eve, if I remember correctly, is when I was working on this. Again, more views. I think this is me working on the last level of the accommodation, deck 14. More suites right there in the exact same spot as they are on the deck below. All right, and then this is when I started working on the kind of the bridge section, that little area where it goes up like this. You got the black part in the middle. This is definitely a difficult part of the build. I wasn't 100% satisfied with the design. It definitely was a lot better than what I did on Icon, but there's a few things that I'm still not particularly happy about with this build, and I'm not going to describe what it all entailed, but just a lot of different curves and angles going on and things needed to match up. So I guess bottom line is there will be a few changes in future Icon builds from this, but it came out largely the way I wanted it to. All right, and then this is where the level of the bridge starts, right here. And again, you'll notice that the reason why it kind of tapers out like this and it's not just like a flat line is because the curve of the bridge section, it's not the same curve as what's in the bottom section of the forward superstructure. The curves are different. So that's why there's a difference in, it starts in the same place, but as the curve changes more, that's why it slopes up a little bit. And that's pretty much the final product. So I guess I'll say this. So one of the changes I'll be making is that I'll be changing the way this curves in so that this little line right here, this should not extend, this should not be out, then extend in, then extend back out again like it is in this build. It should all be relatively the same. It should actually be tapering out, if anything. So this will be a change in the future build. But largely, overall, I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. But there are a few little differences that I'm going to be making in future builds. Then you can start to see my layout of Aquadome right here. Choosing the color of bricks for Aquadome was a little bit of a long debate. I could have used either this form of blue or like the light translucent blue I used with the Icon build. Depending on the way you look at Aquadome, it very much depends on the lighting or the way the light is hitting the structure, and that determines the color you see. Because in some angles it's very dark blue, and some other angles and different lighting it's light blue. I wanted it to be a darker blue because I just really wanted it to stand out. And for the most part, in person, the dome tends to have a darker blue color. So that's just what I use. It just looks a little more realistic in my head than the lighter blue. Makes it it makes it look more like there's a lot of depth to it. There's a lot of stuff inside of it. Whereas if I use the light blue, it looks like that there's not really much in there. It's pretty shallow. So you can start to see the beginnings of the build of the Aquadome. I am so happy with how the Aquadome structure came out to be. This was one of the top difficult parts of the build, but I am very happy with how it turned out. It turned out almost exactly the way it looks in real life. Whereas by the time you get to the top, where especially the baby or the royal blue color is, it should all be the same on every single side. It's a perfect circle, whereas everything below it, it's different. It's not a perfect circle all around. So it just came out really well, but it required a lot of planning ahead of time. I think the planning of Aquadome alone probably took 10 hours of just planning to make sure everything would work. Yeah, really happy with how it turned out in the end. You can see these areas right here. This is the only part of the dome where it isn't the aluminum or the glass panels. You've got these gray panels that are right here, and I don't remember exactly what they're covering up. I know on the port side, at least at the start, there's like some storage that's right here, but I'm not sure if there's anything that's after that. I think like the storage part is like this area right here, but then there's like a divider, and then there might be something behind it, but not entirely sure. What there is on the starboard side, I'm not sure, but these areas are not translucent. Then we start getting to even more fun parts, figuring out the structure of the deck 15. So I'd already determined ahead of time how wide each portion is going to be, how long it's going to be. I think I want to say this portion was supposed to be 61 studs wide, and then the area where buffet would be, the Windjammer buffet, that area was going to be 63 studs wide, because if you actually look at the deck plans and the aerial photos and the different renderings, the width of the backside of deck 15 and 16 is slightly wider than it is on Chill Island on deck 15, 16, and 17. A couple of things like for references, Cove had to match up, like the center of it had to match up with the center of Seaview and where the Pearl is, where this is right here. The starboard side of Chill Island, the area that would be the furthest out matched up exactly where the rearmost portion of the Seaview bulkhead was, things like that. I'm using those as references. Yep, there's the openings right there. The lime and coconut bars are going to go right here eventually. Okay, so now this is when I really start building the upper structure in just gigantic sections. So like I have to build this section first in order to build this section. Once that section's done, then I can work on this section. Kind of the same thing I did with the icon build. The first thing I did was work on Aquadome and kind of the Swede neighborhood at the same time. So right here, this is where the Aquadome marketplace is. And most of the time, the color of the glass between Aquadome and like this or the Windjammer, it's a slightly different color of blue, shade of blue. In reality, they're probably virtually the same color, but it's just the way the light hits and the fact that the venues aren't as big or vast. The color just it's noticeable in most of the photographs and videos you shoot, is that there is a difference in color. So that's what I'm replicating right here. Then back here you've got, so right here is where Hooked Seafood Restaurant is, and then behind it is I think it's the Celebration Table, I think is what it's called. All right, then you got the back side of this part of deck 15. Very, very basic. No artwork whatsoever. Goes up immediately. It works well. And then something people might not be aware about is you've got this divider right here, but then that is actually not the wall to where the celebration table is back here. There's actually a little bit of a gap right here, and it's mainly just storage. When I was on Icon, I looked back there because there's like a few gaps you can look inside. There was a ton of stuff in here, and I think most of it was just because I went on the maiden voyage, so I think a lot of it was just basically trash from like like a lot of the deck furniture they had to unpack while they were on their transatlantic on the way to the US. A lot of that you could see in there, and there's various other things in there, but it's just basically storage in there. And then right here is the beginnings of the kind of table tennis area, ping pong area right there. So I'm basically just, at this point, replicating at least the immediate part of this part of the deck and all the deck patterns, because I'm going to be building this up and it'll be hard to access this later on. So I want to get this part done. And I guess this is another good opportunity to show how hollow these ships are. So look down here. You'll notice there is absolutely no supporting structure beyond just basically, the exterior of the ship. This, you can see the bottom of the ship right here. I mean, that's the board down there. And I think the only supporting structures that are going to be inside this venue are to be supporting, the Swede neighborhood on top. And I think I start to build them basically at this point, but everything underneath this thing is hollow. I mean, unless there is a need to put supporting structures in there for like let's say Central Park, it's completely hollow. There's nothing in there. Yep, there's another view of it right there. Then now we're starting to work on deck 16 right here. Again, you can see it comes out to here, so that's why I wanted to finish the deck pattern in that area beforehand. Here's where the Aquadome marketplace starts. There's that little wavy thing they had in there. You can start to see me outline the various suites in here. And then some more of the Aquadome coming up in the front there. There's a little bit of an art piece that's right there. This eventually, like on this deck, this is where the Swim and Tonic venue is. You can see the entrance to the Ford elevator bank right there. All right, and then this is the beginning of deck 17. You can see the Icon Loft Suites right here. And then I think this is, I forget what that suite is called, but it's the second biggest suite on the ship. It's basically like your second top tier suite on there besides the ultimate family townhouse. I'm 99% sure this is a change from Icon. I'd have to double check it because I don't remember putting this in the script, but I discovered it later on. So this glass that's right here, the glass that's facing, the glass railing that's facing towards the Swim and Tonic venue, it's actually, it's multiple different colors. It's kind of like this wavy blue color. I guess, again, just trying to replicate waves on the sea or something like that. And it's only on this back portion right here, but I'm 99% sure on Icon that feature was not there. It was just your typical translucent glass like it is everywhere else. So that might be a change right there. Then you got some more suites up here, then building up Aquadome even more right there. And for the most part, Aquadome was actually supporting itself. The only reason these supporting structures are right here was just to support plates I'd put down for the decks that are going to be out here eventually. Yep, there, and I think that's the end of the actual glass portion, and then the rest of it's going to be the baby blue, royal blue color. Yeah, I'm very happy with how this turned out. Yep, and then this is the beginnings of kind of, this is going to be where the Grove is. The Grove is that restaurant that's out here for the suite neighborhood. The end of Aquadome is going to be over here eventually. Again, the only reason these supports are in here is just to support the decks. And you've got, this is the Grove right here, that restaurant, kind of like, this is a bar right here, and this is kind of like a buffet style bit of the restaurant right there. There's the hot tub and the pool, some lounging options right here. Yeah, this goes very far back. Some more art right here. That's a change from Icon to Star. It's a different art piece. You can see that multicolored glass right there a little bit better. There's the suite, the Icon Loft Suites. Then you got this top portion of the suite neighborhood right here. It's different on both sides. The pattern is different. Got a bit of artwork right there. And that's kind of the superstructure of the suite neighborhood right there coming up. There's another change from Icon and Star. The overhang to the Grove entrance right here, it's different on Icon than it is on Star. That was one change I found while I was building this. There's the top of it. You got the logo back there. Nothing too special or crazy about this. Oh, the staircases on each side, they're different on each side. On this side, it's very much in basically an L. And on the other side, it does curve around a little bit down here. Comes out like this. And reaching the top of the Aquadome. So yeah, this is the only thing. This is the only supporting structure in here. And the center of it is actually going to be right here. So for the most part, the dome is completely hollow and there's nothing really supporting it except this a little bit. So just like in real life, the dome really supports itself. And I tell you, this final section right here, when I was no longer able to get my fingers underneath to help support the bricks, this was a pain to put together. But once it was put together, it went up fairly easily. Yep, there is Aquadome virtually finished right there. And I want to say the entire process of building this thing, not the planning phase, but the building phase, I want to say it took about 10 to 12 hours. But I'm very, very happy with how it turned out. It's way better than the one on the Icon build. Yeah, you'll notice I still haven't finished the kind of like the bridge wings, even though they're not bridge wings, at the top of the bridge wings here. I still haven't finished that. I think that's one of the last things I even did on the build. But it's small details like that where I'm like, I don't really need to work on that right now. I'll wait till the end to work on it. I want to get the major stuff done first. Okay, now notice the difference in time here, because I believe this is all the same day. This was maybe 10 or 11 in the morning, and this is like 6 o'clock at night. So this whole thing took about 7 hours, maybe 8 hours to do. And it was just figuring out the floor pattern. Now, the floor pattern isn't entirely random, but you just have to know the deck layout above to really understand it and just to know where certain things start and end. So like, for example, I had to identify the cove and what color that was going to be. And then this dark green right here, it largely matches up with where the outside of the kind of the decks are on deck 16 in Chill Island. It matches up with that. And anything exposed is this lime green color right here. So like this whole, like this little arm right here goes like this. And then this whole area right here is open to the elements. So that's lime green. Same thing over here. And then I had to figure out the pattern for, this is where El Loco Fresh is. This is where Cantina Fresca is right here. This is the new area on Star. Icon, it was very different right here. It had a different color palette. It had a lot of funky furniture right here and swings right here. And then on Star, this is just loungers, basically. So I had to figure that out. Then the pool, Royal Bay Pool. If you look very closely, you can see the deep section right there where that dark blue water is. And then the rest of it's this light transparent blue right here. And then this is me outlining the lime and coconut structures right there. This is just for planning purposes. These are obviously not going to be here later on. You can see I've now finished the kind of the ping pong area right there. There's where the new hot tub is. It's satisfying to see it at the end. Really makes you understand the ship. It's not just a bunch of random patterns. It actually has reason to the patterns. Okay, then this is the artwork that's above like the forward part of Surfside on deck. Let's see, this would be the bottom of deck 15. You know, above this is where the Windjammer Cafe would be. And there it is placed right there. So you can see how much of Surfside is sheltered based on where this ends and then where the actual wall ends way back here. So there's a ton of Surfside that's actually well sheltered. Yeah, it's not a ton of it that's actually exposed to the elements. It's about half of the venue is covered up by either this or this back here. You can see the outline of where the outside part of the Windjammer is. Again, I'm 99% sure this is 63 studs wide, whereas Chill Island at its maximum is 61 studs wide. There's the hideaway. I would make this change later on, but originally I put this as a 3x2, and then later on I changed it to be a 2x2. I just added in a few different pieces to make it the same as these. There it is filled in right there. Now, this is kind of a limitation just because of the bricks I have, but in reality, the water is supposed to go up one stud further, but I needed to put the divider in because you got a divide right here and then another divide that's lower down right here. But in order to put this divide in, I have to put in that kind of, I don't even know what you would call it, the railing piece. But in order to put that in, I can't put any water right here. So in all reality, the water is supposed to come out a little bit further. So the venue does look a little bit smaller than what it actually is, but again, in order to put these dividers in, I can't have the water going all the way up here. So a little bit of an iffy thing, but that's just what it has to be. You can see the bar right there. Then there's the top level. So this is deck 16 now that we're working on. This is where, right in this area, this is where category 6 is going to be. Back here is where base camp is going to be. That used to be specialty restaurant on Icon, but then they changed it, and then now on Icon and Star it's a complimentary option, which is really nice. I never understood why that was a specialty restaurant. I'm glad they made it complimentary at the end. Then we're starting to begin that transition from deck 15 to deck 16, so I'm starting to lay the staircases out right here. On this side, it's got the multicolored staircase, and on the other side, it's just white. And then now I'm starting to plan the outline for the kind of the funnel superstructure. It's the central funnel superstructure. That's what I tend to call it. And it was at the end of, I think it was the day prior. It's when I planned this right here. I was planning the shape that I wanted, and then the artwork in the middle, just because it was so complex. I'm like, I want to plan this out ahead of time just because I want to get the look correct. I don't want to try and figure this out off the cuff. So that's the design I ended up coming up with. So this is what's behind the star, the purple, kind of like hot pink star structure. So you can see I'm playing the outline right there. You've got some markers right here for how far forward I want the venue to be. Continue forward, then that's when I start building up this thing. So you've got like this area right here where you can collect towels for the pool. There's a restroom that's nestled in back here, so a little fun building that. Again, might not notice it in the actual build, but I built that detail in there. It's just a little bit of an opening back there. Here's the entrance to the aft elevator bank. Here's Cantina Fresca right here. Here's the port side lime and coconut on deck 15, which is right there. And then right here is where Sprinkles is, the ice cream. And there's like a little lounging area right here. There's the ping pong area. You can see I've set up the 2 hot tubs, and then there is the cove right there, the pool that sticks out the side on the port side. And I'm starting to lay out some of the different supporting structures right there. There's some more of the structures. I'm starting to build and figure out the deck above, deck 16 right here. You can see pretty much the Loco Fresh section is done. I guess another thing I should mention in these builds is I don't really build a lot of I call it the non-permanent furniture. So anything that can be moved around, like the sun loungers, I don't build these in here. Anything that's permanent or a part of the structure, I obviously build in. But anything other than that, I really don't put in. I don't put in any furniture. I obviously don't put in any people. But yeah, anything that's permanent, I will build. Start to see I'm figuring out more of deck 16 right here, starting to build that up. There's some overall views at the end of the day. Yep, starting to come together. So yeah, largely at the front at this point is done. Besides a few different items, small items that I'll build later on. This forward part is largely done. And now we're starting to begin building deck 16 right here, Chill Island. Again, the deck pattern's laid out. And this is so clever because I think part of the reason why they've got these different color changes is that this outlines where the sun loungers go. You won't see the sun loungers go beyond where this light blue and the brown starts. The sun loungers perfectly match up to where these colors are, which is, it's just funny to think about. Yeah, go look at pictures or aerial views of these ships. You will see the sun loungers outlined with these differences in the colors of the deck here. You start to see the beginnings of me building the swim and tonic right there. There's the starboard lime and coconut on 15. There's the new whirlpool there that Icon doesn't have. So, somewhat low detail, but I try to get a few things in right there. And, yep, there's the beginnings of the end of the swim and tonic, and now I'm working on the port side lime and coconut that's over there. Wrapping up the deck up here, so now pretty much deck 16, at least in Chill Island, is largely done. And then there was building up that artwork back there that I'd worked on in Mecha Bricks. And then now we're starting to get to some more fun parts of the build, and that's working on Thrill Island, which takes up this whole back portion right here. So you can start to see where base camp is going to be. This is where the mini golf course will end up being, and then obviously the water park right back here. And this is now when I took the opportunity to plan this right here, just because, again, it's such a complex piece of artwork. I didn't want to try and build it off the cuff. I want to say this took me about 2 hours to plan. I had various photographs and videos of this section, so it was fairly easy to put this thing together. It's just a matter of getting the right patterns and getting the right colors. So you can see the outline right there. I'm starting to plan the outline of the venue right there. Another overall shot. See how things are coming together. There's the thumbnail. Yep, so still have quite a bit of progress that needs to be made, but the ship, at this point, the ship is largely coming together, and now I'm starting to really get satisfied with what is being made. Then here is the final layout, the floor pattern for Thrill Island. They did such a good job with the deck patterns, essentially Whether you realize it or not, the way the patterns work in here, it really forces you to take certain avenues and to avoid certain places just simply by, okay, the areas that are brown, those are going to be your walkways. Anything that's essentially green is where loungers are going to be. Anything that's blue is going to be basically taken up by equipment, basically. But it kind of, behind the scenes, like it kind of forces your brain to kind of stay in these walkways just because of the difference in color. So just a little small detail that's interesting. And so, yep. So that took, I think, maybe 3 hours to figure out. Now I'm starting to build up deck 17 at this point. So now I'm starting to work on more of the starboard lineman coconut there. There's the port side. This is kind of like where this is where they do the frozen drinks. So they've got the kind of like the slushy machines. I'm not sure what those are called. They got those back here. So I've got the different flavors right here. So I think one of them was strawberry, one of them was mango maybe, and then there was like a pina colada version and then something else. So that's what these colors are replicating. The part for swim and tonic right there, which is a little bit lower than the deck over here. All right, now I'm starting to work on Cloud 17 at this point, which was going to be the adults only venue when Icon first came out, but then they changed it at the last minute. So this area is now open to everybody. But being on both ships, kids really don't come up here in the first place. It's pretty rare to see them up there. And I think part of the reason is because it was designed to be a very isolated venue. You kind of have to go out of your way to get up there. So I think for that reason, kids largely don't come up here in the first place. So it's kind of like an unofficial adults only area. Do kids come up there? Yeah, but for the most part, they don't. And there's all the supporting structures underneath. Now, I had to take some creative liberty just because of where things matched up and how many of each thing there was. But for the most part, it's pretty accurate. So yeah, like I knew, again, the apex of how far out Chill Island came out on this side was supposed to line up with this bulkhead right here. So you've got this divider, right? Or you've got the support structure that's right here that I knew was at this precise point right there. You know, things I'm looking at. All right, and then that's the deck finally done. I think that took a couple hours to figure out. But the staircase in the middle there, that's really the only way, that is the only way to get to this part of Chill Island from the outside. Every other way to get to this part of Chill Island, you have to go from outside to inside, back to outside. So if you're soaking wet, you're most likely not going to come up here. Like if you're in the Royal Bay pool and you want to go to Cloud 17, the only way to get up here outside is to take the staircase. And then there's the pool looking over the side right here. Again, the deeper water I tried to replicate with the dark blue, and then the lighter part I replicated with the lighter blue. See the lime and coconut structures right there. Okay, then this is base camp. This is the area where you can grab your food right there. That is the representation of the Coca-Cola machine. Glad to get that kind of detail in there. And then this is where deserted is right here, which is the milkshake bar. And this is the other side. I think there's a couple cornhole things that are on the deck right here. But this is just, it says like, oh, Thrill Island right here. And then there's a complex pattern back there. Then you can start to see where I'm planning out the slides for Category 6. This area right here is where like the wooden railings are going to go that mark that divide between the common area and where the slides are going to be. So that's why these things are open like this. There's a RP structure. That's what I had made in the program the previous day. Then there's the basketball court right here. Again, yet another thing I'm very happy about compared to Icon, because I ended up building this the wrong way on that build compared to this one. So much happier with how this turned out. Then you got Lost Dunes mini golf course right there. In reality, there is one extra palm tree. It's a fake palm tree, but there is one more in here. But for the sake of space, I wasn't able to put it in because these are slightly bigger than what they are in real life. But yeah, there's Lost Dunes. This is the kind of smoking area, I think it's the only designated smoking area on the outside of the ship. It's located back here, that whole space. So largely isolated from everything, which is kind of nice. And here's the back side. This is on the port side. Backside, this is where the basketball court is. This is where that artwork is. Not too happy with how this turned out, but it was one of those things where, in all reality, I don't know how I could have built this better, again, without getting a bunch of special bricks. So, like this section right here, it's pretty much going to be covered up completely by the rock climbing wall, which is going to be right here. Here's the base of it. And then there's going to be another detail, I'll show this later on, that I put in here, but it's going to be largely hidden away. Okay, come up top. Now we're building the funnel superstructure. Nothing too extravagant here, just supporting structures. And putting in the top here. And then this area, it's going to have its own unique deck pattern, so that's why I'm not working on it at this point. There's the first Crown and Anchor logo on the starboard side. And a bit of a different design than what I had been doing originally. I wanted to try a new design out, and I think it turned out fine. And the thing I changed was I didn't make the width of the top the same as the width of the bottom, because in reality it does taper out a little bit as it goes up. So this is the way I was able to try and replicate that. Does it look a little weird? Yeah, but it's the way I'm able to show it tapering out. Then the end of the starboard lime and coconut, or I guess both of them. Now, this was probably the biggest mistake I made in the build, and I realized this way too late, is I made the starboard lime and coconut a little too wide, because what I was referencing ended up being wrong for like how wide the venue was supposed to be. I used the wrong reference point, and again, by the time I figured it out, it was way too late. And that resulted in the windbreaker, the aft part of the windbreaker that's going to be on top of this, being too big. We'll get to that in a minute, but this was probably the biggest mistake I made on the build, and it will definitely be corrected in future builds. Then there's the port side Crown and Anchor logo, and then there is Crown's Edge right there, and way better than what it was on the Icon build, because on the Icon build, I built it the wrong way, because all the renderings and all the videos showed it going the opposite way. By the time they released the actual venue, it was way too late to change it. I had already taken all the photographs, but here is the corrected version. So you got the walkway right there. So yeah, I'm pretty happy with how that turned out. Low detail, but it gets the job done. There's another view of it right there. There's where the staircase is that leads up to the venue. This is the thing that's going to go behind the rock wall. There was like this little swirl artwork, I guess, they could put right there. Again, you're not going to see this except the very edge of it, but it's one of those things where if you look hard enough, you can see it. So that's why I put the detail in there. But unless you're up there and you know it's there, people are not going to see this. But just a small detail I put in there. And there it is back there. Okay, going forward. Now I've got like the wind breaking canvas structure right here for the central superstructure here. Now, this is when I was starting to hit a problem with this build. I, for the life of me, don't know how this happened, but I used way more baby blue, this baby blue royal color on this build than I did on the Icon build. And by this point, I was actually starting to run out of virtually all pieces of that color. So I really had to cannibalize and make a few tweaks here and there with these bricks. So this build did not turn out exactly the way I wanted it to and how it is in real life, but this is what I was able to make based on what I had left. It's pretty good for the most part, but there's a few things here and there that aren't exactly correct. And then this is when I was starting to work on the funnel. So you can see the outline of the funnel at the base, and then I also have the outline of the funnel at the top. This was another thing I really wanted to correct on the Icon build. The funnels were comedically small on the Icon build. I was very much not happy with how those turned out. as time went on. So I definitely want to get these things right, because the funnels are definitely one of the major things you just have to get right on these builds, just because they're so pronounced. And if you get those wrong, it just looks ridiculous. So I definitely wanted to make sure I got the funnels correct on this one. There's another overall view. I know I sent this to Brandon. He was ship spotting one day and the topic came up in one of his live streams, and I sent this to him as like a oh, here's my progress of the build. Yep, some more progress. Up top, you can just start to see I'm beginning the starboard funnel right there. And now we're working on both of them. Yep, nothing too complicated with these funnels. They're pretty simple. The inside, there's the top. And then the stacks added right there. So one thing I'm coming on, and I'm gonna look back at this and try and figure out where I went wrong with this, but by the end, the build is actually about one stud total, one stud shorter than it needs to be. And it is the difference, the correction in height has to be somewhere up here, because everything below down here I know is correct. The height is supposed to be what it's supposed to be. But something basically above deck 17, something is wrong with the height. So I need to figure out later on where that is, and I'll do that when I build a future sister. So I don't think it's the funnels, because I quintuple checked to make sure the funnels were the right height and that the stacks are the right height. So there's something down here that's a little shorter than it's supposed to be. So, because if I do the measurements on this build, Star would be about 235 feet high, and I think in reality she's like 244 feet high. I want to say somewhere in the 240 range. So somewhere in here, it's a little bit shorter than it's supposed to be. So we'll figure that out. There's the view with the funnels. So really starting to come together, but we are missing some things. We're missing the windbreaker up front, and we're missing the aft towers in the water park. But we are getting really close to getting this ship done. So next thing I work on is the windbreaker that's above the lime and coconut structures. This is definitely one of the most difficult builds on here, just because there's so many different curves and they all have to interact correctly. The way I built it on this, it's not 100% what I wanted, but it is by far and away better than what I had on Icon. The one I had on Icon was comedically bad. And again, it was just because, the ship wasn't complete yet, and all the renderings showed various different versions of it, so I just didn't know exactly what it was going to look like, but this was easily by far and away the better version when it comes to this class and the way I'm building it. Now, because of the mistake I had made with making this thing too wide, these extensions that are coming out, it comes out way too much. It's not supposed to come out further than basically like here maybe. So that is something that will be corrected later on, because the height of where these partitions stop, that is correct. But because of this, these things came out too far. So that will definitely get corrected in future builds. There's the stack for the LNG compartment. Yep, that's the whole thing completed. I think that took about 6 hours to make. It's a long process. So glad when I finally got that done. And then now we're starting on the Category 6 water park. So this is another limitation with the build, and you'll see this later on. But one of the details that I've talked about in multiple videos that I like about these ships is that they have the color of the water slides painted onto the deck. And you can see that right here. So you got the green and the pink one that share the outer part of the staircase. And on the inner part, you got the yellow one. And then they split off. And then up here, you've got the pink and the green side by side. This is so people know what line to get into for a particular slide. Because I wanted to show that detail, I wasn't able to add in the wooden railings that are on the side, the multicolored wooden railings. But then on like another part of this venue, I added the railings. Like down here, I was able to add the railings. Just because if I wanted to add the railings on the staircase would have to be the equivalent of almost 10 feet wide, which in reality it's not. I mean, the width of the staircase is actually kind of pushing it, because I want to say the staircase is maybe 4 to 5 feet wide, and this would be about 7, just shy of 7 feet wide in reality. So this is a little bit wider than it's supposed to be, but this is fairly close, and I really wanted to show the details of the colors being on the floor. So that's why I don't have any of the railings up on here. And then we got the aft towers. So let me move my camera over here. So back here, you can see this is just a reference to see how each level of the tower changes, because the way it slopes inward and the way it slopes upward, it's all different. So I wanted to see how the bricks would line up to show the curve and show the incline and all that stuff. So I use that as a reference, and then based on that reference, then I'll build the actual stack. This is one thing where the artwork for the most part on these ships, on between Icon and Star, it's different. This is one of the few areas where, like the major art pieces, this is one of the few areas where it's exactly the same. And from what it looks like, from what I've seen on Legend so far, the artwork is exactly the same on that too. So slightly disappointing that's the case, but hey, it's still cool. It's vastly different than the artwork they showed on the Icon renderings. So when I made my Icon build, it was vastly different from what it turned out to be. So this is the first time I was able to build something with the correct artwork. So there's the beginnings of it. And then there's the end of the starboard stack. And I want to say this took about 3 hours to make, fairly long. But believe it or not, this is the easier stack to do, because the other one, and I'm just starting to begin to building it right there, the other one has a staircase that goes around it. So I got to think about that too. So yep, you got the staircase right there and all the different artwork that's on it. And then there's like this little alcove right here where the stairs are going to come down, and then below that are going to be 2 restrooms that are down here. You can actually see the door of one of the restrooms right here that I've put in already. This is one of the small gripes I have with the class, and the reason is because this door, when it opens up into this small, I don't know, walkway that's right here. And if you're not careful, that door will open up all the way to the railing. So if you're standing right there and that door opens up, you're going to get pinned. So one of the very few gripes I have with the class, and it's on both ships so far. So I hope there's a way to change that on future sisters, but I'm not holding my breath. And then that's the whole thing completed. So I think this whole thing took about 7 hours to make, maybe 8 hours. Definitely, like, I started at 6 in the morning with this, and then at this point I think it was maybe 1 in the afternoon, maybe. So that's the whole thing. You can see the 2 restroom doors right there. This is the restroom in particular that I have a problem with, because again, this door opens up and it basically lines up with the railing that's right here. So like, again, one time I was standing right here, and this was boarding day on Icon. I was standing right here, someone opened the door, it pinned me up against the railing. It doesn't hurt you. It's not like it swings open. It's a very gentle opening, but just a small gripe I have. Now I'm starting to finish the end of the hideaway here. You got the 2 whirlpools. They are slightly bigger than the normal ones. You got the DJ booth right here. You got some lounging right here. Yep, that's the completed aft stacks, and the 3 of the water slides are going to come out here. And then right before I work on the slides, I'm going to work on where the Flowrider Surf Simulator is. That's this venue right here, or where will be the base of it. I think that took about an hour to make, but I basically just filled this whole place up with bricks, and then that's the end result right there. So fairly happy with how this turned out. I think the Flowrider is probably 1 stud longer than it needs to be, but it's fairly close. All right, and this is when I begin working on the Category 6 water park. Here's the first one. This is the pressure drop, which is the first open freefall slide at sea. This one, I think I probably use this one the least, not because it's scary, but because if you're not careful, your feet can bounce around pretty easily. And one time I banged up my, I think it was my left ankle pretty good, and so I just tend not to use this slide that much. But it's super fun, so definitely the easiest slide to work on. So that's why I did it first. Next one I did was the first of the two storm chasers. Right here, you can see it comes around. And starting to begin the supporting structures, there's this one area down here that has a clear section. And I noticed on Legend recently, they started taking the canvas sheets off the ship because it's the end of winter now. And so they're starting to take off the canvas sheets. And something I noticed is that this clear section isn't on that slide anymore. It's purely the same color. So I built that one. Then I built the Frightening Bolt, which is the drop slide, and it's a 46-foot drop in total, I believe. So there it is right there. Fairly simple slide. And I guess one thing I should mention, previously, or for the most part, especially with these thinner slides, I used to not have these studs connecting in this nature. I would just angle them. It would just be one stud thick, and I would just angle them. And I thought it looked a little sloppy at some points. And so this is the first time I really tried to utilize having the slides interlock and have them being two flat plates high. I think it turned out pretty well, and I think I'll probably do that going forward. It just looks a little nicer, and it actually shows the height of the slide better. It's not just like a flat slide. It actually has some depth, and someone's going to be able to go through the middle of it. Then came the second Storm Chaser slide. They're the exact same length. They're both exactly the same in length. There's the clear section right there. Then there's at the end here, those are the meters where it's timing you. So once you are complete and you get out, you can see how fast you went down the slide, and hopefully you beat the other person. And I don't know why. Well, I could probably guess why, because it happened on both Icon and Star. And I think it's if you use I want to say it's the dark blue one, you actually tend to go down a few seconds faster than the light blue one. It might be the other way around, but one of them, it seems like you go faster than the other one, even though they're the exact same length. So I think it's the dark blue one, where if you go on that one, it's slightly faster. All right, and then we start working on the Storm Surge, which is kind of the more extreme of the two family raft slides right here. Then there's the Lotus Leaf Wall. Still not 100% happy with how it turned out, but it's, again, way better than what I had on the Icon build. I don't have any light green translucent pieces, and LEGO doesn't currently sell any of them, so I had to build the whole thing clear, which in reality, only this top portion is clear and the rest of it is like a translucent green. But yep, there's Storm Surge right there. And last but not least, we have Hurricane Hunter. Now, I don't have a ton of this kind of like hot pink color. I guess would be like, I forget what the color is in LEGO, but LEGO doesn't sell a ton of the basic bricks for this color right now. And so there are a lot of pieces that I have for the other slides, but on this particular one I don't. So because of that, the way I had to build it was a little bit more, I couldn't get every single angle I want, so I had to be a lot more extreme in how the slide turns than what it actually does in real life. So like, especially at the top right here, in reality, it maybe comes out to here gently and comes back in. It does not swing way out here and come back in like I had to, but that's how I had to build it in the end, just because I don't have all the pieces I need to do it correctly. And with that, the Category 6 water park is virtually done. You can see the multicolored wooden railings that are along the side here. Now, I will say, when I build Legend, obviously Icon 4 isn't out right now, so I don't know what that water park is going to look like, but when I do Legend, it is going to be 10 times harder to do this place. The A3 slides will be fine, and the pressure drop will be fine, if that's what the name of it turns out to be. But the two raft slides, their colors change like every few feet. It goes from like a teal blue to like a hot pink to a slightly darker form of blue to like a purple on one of them. So like every two studs basically I have to change the color of the slide. I still have no idea how I'm going to do that with the bricks I have. I think there's a way to do it. It's just not going to turn out as cleanly as I want it to turn out. So that's going to be interesting planning that water park when the time comes. Just because these two raft slides, they're very multicolored. So I don't quite know how I'm going to do it yet. Then we get to the lifeboats. This is by far the most tedious thing. Besides the accommodation section, this is the most tedious thing about the build. And they usually take 3 to 5 hours to make, depending on how many lifeboats there are per ship. But the nice thing is, I had already built this type of lifeboat before on the Celebrity Edge build. And because of that, and because of the fact that when I built Celebrity Edge, I had already had this ratio in mind, I knew that the lifeboats were going to be exactly the same, but I double checked and yep, the dimensions lined up. So I basically just replicated what I built on the Celebrity Edge build and then just obviously matched it to the Icon and Star version because they're the exact same lifeboats. They're the Palfinger, I think it's MPC 46 or 49 lifeboats, something like that. It's in the video. Go watch it. Yeah, they're the exact same type of lifeboats. And there we go. There's the davits. And then here's a good time to illustrate. So this is the forwardmost lifeboat. You'll see that like over here, all the other lifeboats, with the exception of the first one in the aft section, you've got the davit and you got the space between the bulkhead. But then those two lifeboats, there is no space because in reality on the ship, they are substantially closer to the bulkhead than the others. This is the area right here. We've got the life rafts and like the chutes that come out here. There's the rib that's right there. Here's the other side. You've got this, I think it's also a fast deployment craft right there. This only exists on the port side. On the starboard side, there isn't anything noteworthy. All right, so now I've gone to the point where all the major structures of the ship are done. Now I'm starting to move into the more finite details. I do this with every build. Again, it's just building up the major structures first, and then if the area is going to be hard to access later on, then I'll build all the details I can. But if I'm able to get access to the area later, I'm not going to worry about the minor details at that point. So here I put in Splashaway Bay. I put in like these kind of faux decorative palm trees. I don't know what they're called, but they're everywhere on the exterior part of the decks. So there's two of them in here. A little bit of miscellaneous equipment in Splashaway Bay as well. And then that's when I built the arch. This was the last major structure on the ship that I had to make. Everything else was all minor details. I think the arch turned out a lot better than what it was on the Icon build. I was expecting this to take forever and have to go through 5,000 different versions to build this thing. I think I got this done within 2 versions. And it turned out way better than I was expecting it to. I was not expecting it to turn out this well. Again, is it perfect? No. So this is the star sculpture that's going to go in between like the funnel uptakes and that central funnel superstructure. This is the star right here. And again, it's not perfect, but it came out way better than I was expecting it to. Very happy with it. I think I built this within like 30 minutes. And there it is right there. Went in perfectly. And then now we're entering the final stage. These are kind of like my final photographs before the build is wrapped up. So this is kind of the moment where I've got all the details in. Now I'm taking one giant sweep of the entire ship to make sure all the details that I want are there. So things like, okay, there's like this white box. This is where the entrance and exit is onto this deck. There's like this little white box that's right there. Not sure what it is. Maybe like a fire extinguisher, storage or something like that. But stuff like that. Or there's a small horn that's right here. I made sure that was there. Yep, some other miscellaneous details. Like I've got the trees, those faux trees up there right now. The radar domes, those are up there. All the railings are done. Some more of the Category 6, though the very, very, very shallow water that's in the flow rider. I've got that replicated in there. And then just make sure the back is good. There's those faux trees right there. Railings are in position. There's no permanent furniture I'm missing. You'll see that I've updated the DJ booth back there with some of this red stuff. There's like these red hexagonal features that are up there that I originally didn't put in, but later on I did. And then this is usually the final photograph I take. It's usually looking kind of forward into the side of the funnels. That's basically it for the build. Notice how much junk is down here. It's kind of like the shipyards in real life, where especially while they're in the dry dock, if you look around the ships, there's so much junk and equipment and stuff like that that's just scattered all around the vessel. It's just funny how that tends to happen. And believe it or not, this is actually a lot more clean than it usually is. Usually there's just piles of spare Legos that are down here. And these were the final pictures I took. I think this is around like 6 or 7 p.m. in the evening, so obviously it's not complete, but then those are the photographs from the next day. Okay, and with that is the journey to building Star of the Seas, and kind of an informal way of how I build these cruise ships. Again, maybe someday I'll make a proper formal video, or kind of like a step-by-step process, and maybe it's like I'm designing or preparing to build another cruise ship. I'll do a video where it's literally me actually planning this thing out. The reason why I haven't done that is because oftentimes it is just me concentrating. I'm not going to be able to do a lot of talking, and sometimes it will take literally 10 to 12 hours at least just to plan like a profile, or plan like a particular venue's artwork pattern or stuff like that. It'd be very boring to watch, and quite frankly, I don't think there's more than maybe a couple dozen people that would watch that. So this was a very broad, generalized, off-the-cuff way of talking about how I build these ships, and I hope that gives you a bit of an idea of what I do and what I try to replicate and the things I have to do in terms of like compromises. But I hope you found this enjoyable and a little bit insightful. And if you really want to build ships of this size, and I mean, I'll warn you, it's pretty expensive, and it's taken me years and lots of money to build up the brick collection that I do have. But if you're willing to and want to build ships of this size, this is pretty much the way I do it. And I hope you learned a little bit more about Star herself that you may have not learned in the historical video, and learned about some little Easter eggs that are scattered throughout the build that you may have missed, because it's impossible to find them in the video unless you're really looking hard. I hope you have enjoyed this episode. Again, if you have reached to this point of the video, you are a very dedicated viewer, and I thank you for watching this. This is just a hobby that I do. This is not my primary job, and I know my viewership isn't that big. My subscriber count is definitely not that big, but I am extremely grateful to everyone who watches and subscribes to the channel. I never ask for people to comment and subscribe and like a video. It's just not me. It's like, if you're subscribing to the channel, if you're viewing my content, if you're liking the video, I take that as me earning it. I have earned that subscription, or I've earned that like. I'm never going to ask or beg for that stuff, so I do appreciate it when you guys do like the content. And I hope, again, you found this enjoyable and insightful, and this may be the first in a line of series of the LEGO Shipyard series videos. I'm definitely not going to be making this for every single LEGO build I do, but for some of the major ships, the more popular ships, I'll probably do a video on it, and this one was definitely one where I wanted to do it and to kind of kickstart this. And I don't know the next ship we're going to do this, but I've got some fun ships coming up in the pipeline. I've already teased the next ship that is going to be debuting on the channel, and funny enough, I actually built that ship almost a year and a half ago at this point, so it's long overdue. I've got 2 ships. So the next ship is about a year and a half old, and the ship that's going to be after that is a little more than a year old at this point. Following those ships, I mean, those ships are going to be exciting, but following those ships, we're going to have some let me say, more unique cruise ships compared to what I have built. So there's a little bit of a tease of what's going to be coming up in probably the next year to 2 years on the channel. Some more unique ships. So again, this is the Brick Executive signing off. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll talk again very soon.